the only source of communication, the only medium we could rely on was the media. And I think media did a phenomenal job in getting the right message across to the community. A very strong connect of Government of India and its policies, helping those policies and those announcements reach out to community. I think media played the most important role. And I'm sure he would talk about electronic media and other, but there's another strong sort of media category of social media which is growing, and I'm sure we like to moving forward. Going forward, we would like to engage with that as well. I'm sure that would be a great source of sort of information for our audience. So I think we have Himanshu Shekhar Mishra ji with us. Very good afternoon, Himanshu ji. A very warm welcome to you.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can, Himanshu. We can hear you. Yes, namaskar.
Great.
Hello, Chandan sir. Great to see you.
Welcome. Sorry that we could not give you any Saturday slot this time. You wanted to be more prepared and more geared to Saturday, because he told me, sir, I am free on Saturday, Sunday. Whatever lecture or whatever you want, I will be fully prepared. Otherwise, weekdays it is difficult. But you made it. That is a bonus.
In fact, just 2 minutes back, I finished my PPP, and I think just mailed it to Akhil Saiya. That did not give me the time to actually spend, because you first send a mail that you are thinking of a new date, and suddenly you went back to your plan. And so, yeah, but I think I have readied my presentation, sir. So.
Thank you so much, Himanshu ji, for joining us today afternoon. I think it means a lot to us. Thank you for taking our time, and apologies for any inconvenience which was caused due to shifting of dates and then retaining the date this week. There were certain unforeseen circumstances, certain pressing reasons that we could not conduct it last week. But as they say, as long as we are doing it, this is all to build better capacities, develop better capacities amongst all stakeholders who are joining us from all across the country and even from neighboring countries, which includes Bangladesh, Thailand, even Sri Lanka, and from the Middle East. We had almost 300 participants signed in at all times in last 2 days. We had over 700 registrations for this particular OTP, this online training program, and this is an ongoing effort of FICCI and NIDM under MOU which was signed last year, although the relationship goes back over 10 years, but we inked a formal MOU just before COVID lockdown last year. I think that has really taken a huge shape. We have been able to reach out to over 10,000 professionals from all sectors, from all different walks of life. CSOs, industry, academia, government officials. In the last 1 year, over 10,000 now. And I think we are only going stronger. And with marquee and important speakers like you, Himanshu ji, I think we have been able to expand our reach and expand the relevance of our platform even further. So thank you so much again for joining us today afternoon, Mr. Shekhar. Thank you. So I would request Dr. Ghosh. Before we're approaching 10 past 2. If you would like to just give a brief background or a brief reflection on the last couple of days, if that's okay with you, and then we could introduce Himanshu Shekhar ji to the audience formally and hand it over to him for his presentation. Over to you, Dr. Ghosh.
Okay. Thank you, Rubab, and also your team, Akhil, Varun, and Mainagi. And we are on the last day of this 3-day session. which is on, in fact, the role of industries in COVID disaster management and mitigation. So on the first day, we had brief inaugural session, and then followed by one presentation from my side. I often do in most of the program that we have been doing. That what are the things that we look forward. Then we had one presentation from industry, Mr. Rituraj Mehta, that who himself was down with COVID. He was not able to speak even, just not even in 2 weeks time, that he was just got rid of COVID, but of course, COVID related, he lost more than 16 kilo weight. But even then, during the session, it was so much touchy and so much live, and he was not able to take even breathing, even while he was talking. But still, how as a private sector organization, Adani Group, he is heading many of the transmission roads and many things, how they have made their company and work and integrity functioning during that COVID second wave period intact and round the clock that they have worked. So that is one kind of stressful yet successful journey that he has shared through his entire organization across the country. And then yesterday we had presentation. The first presentation was from Dr. Sunil Pandey, especially on the basis of state of the world environment, especially in the context of 5th June, World Environment Day. In fact, this program was planned 3 to 5, but since it was shifted, we had already session that commemorating this 5th of June as one of the session dedicated to environment, because we are all here some way or other inflicted by environment. Rather, we have rather crossed our borders in making environment or climate behaving in this manner. We have made it our own things. So we could present a lot of things about that. What is the PM2 particle? What are the waste? And what are being generated, and what are their uses country-wise? He has shown us that what is the current state of the world, that world map, through world map he has shown that what is the state of the environment right now and what is the concern. Then we had Dr. Anil Gupta, my colleague, we joined together in an IDM from, and he presented the perspective of Prime Minister's 10-point agenda and what are the different types of disaster which were missing or which were not present even 5 years before, 10 years before, which has now come to taken a place in the chart of our number of disasters which are increasing, which are mostly not only like pandemic like that we are facing. So he has given a very, of course, less powerful presentation that he has made about in the second presentation. And then third one was by Deepak Pandeyji. He has shown that how his fertilizer, Deepak Fertilizer Company has made. Simply saying profit is 3 times profit they have made from the normal time. Despite he has mentioned that how they have worked around the clock, facing all these trouble, especially sanitizer that they have used, and they have given more than 1,100 ton of sanitizer to the government agencies. Even then, how they could revolutionize their manufacturing process towards making sanitizer and helping not only their own company and every employee following the rule that COVID, that government and everyone that set up, but also to the community. So he has shown that really how an organization or industry they function. So that was also very much learning for us. So, so finally, we came for today to welcome Mr. Himanshu Shekhar. Just I want to say one word about him or his institution that holding, it is NDTV. Of course, these days we have got a lot of love as well as hate, a lot of affection as well as other side of that. about the media, but we know that how media play the role. So that is the main topic is here, role of media in COVID-19, and the way that whenever we check out that how a media should be, then when we put them into certain standards, NDTV comes there in the number one. And many of us, we know that if it is a news from NDTV, we definitely put our mind to that. Yes, let me go through the details because there is some sort of stamping and authenticity or some kind of proof. And a person like Himanshu Shekharji is here, and many of his team members, their dedication and their worthiness for more than I think 30 years now, NDTV. So right, like that, the way that they have made an institution on its own solidarity or on own foundation of authenticity as well as significance of not media as a business, but media as a fourth, I think, what is that? Fourth dimension of, yeah. So, so that way, that gives a significance to the role of media, and especially in case of COVID, which no other than him can describe in a manner that in this forum that we are expecting.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ghosh, for that brief background on what we have achieved in last 2 days. And of course, also formally welcome Himanshuji on today's platform. And of course, you mentioned about NDTVs and its role in community awareness and and social development of the country, and the credibility it brings to the platform or as a very important stakeholder in this entire process of disaster risk reduction in a community. So I would now, without taking any longer, I would like to briefly introduce Sri Himanshu Shekhar Mishra ji, who holds an MPhil degree from School of International Studies, JNU. He did his post-graduation. I'm wondering, is my voice clear? Am I not?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Yes? Okay, cool.
100%.
Brilliant. Himanshu Shekharji, he holds his post-graduation in political science from Center for Political Studies, JNU, and graduation in English Literature, honors degree from Delhi University. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, he works as a senior editor, Government Affairs in New Delhi Television, India, NDTV, part of the Prime Minister's official entourage, the UN Annual Summit in New York in September 2003, and also to Indo-Turkish Summit in Ankara and Istanbul in 2003. He has covered Prime Minister's official visits to Pakistan, very important visit then in January 2004, and Afghanistan, of course, in August 2005 as a TV news journalist. He has also reported and researched on issues related with climate-related disasters like floods,
legal rights of disaster victims, threats posed by climate change, development processes, and sustainable development goals. His research paper on unprecedented floods in Jammu and Kashmir in September 2014 was selected for presentation at the 3rd United Nations World Conference on DRR, Disaster Risk Reduction, in Sendai, Japan in March 2015. Mr. Shekhar's second research paper, titled Urban Flooding and Threats to Sustainable Development, was published in an edited volume titled Disaster Risk Management in Agriculture, Case Studies in South Asian Countries by Business Experts Press in April 2019 in New York. In last 5 years, he has presented research papers on climate-related disasters at ASEAN conferences, at BRICS symposiums, at various technical institutes in the country, IITs, JNU, and of course, also presented a paper on disaster reporting at Asia Media Conference 2017 held in Seoul, South Korea. So with that immense experience of not only journalism but very detailed study on disaster risk reduction, especially from a climate perspective, I think it is my proud privilege to welcome Himanshu Shekhar Mishra ji to our platform, and I would now hand over to him for his presentation on role of media in COVID-19, especially the second wave. Over to you, Himanshu.
Thank you, Rubab sir, and I compliment you for creating this platform where there is a regular interface between and among the stakeholders. And I think disasters, as we know, is emerging as a national priority. I think 10 years back, we were not talking about disasters with such frequency as we do it today. And you know what the point that I'm making. And I remember when I went to cover the Kashmir floods and I was called for a conference in JNU, I said that I have heard that this is the first conference on disasters in JNU, which is India's premier research institution. And that is also part of the larger crisis India is facing, in the sense that why we did not actually work seriously on disasters, why we never took disasters seriously. But thank you very much. And I think now increasingly last 4 or 5 years, there's a greater interest now, there's greater focus on how we can combat disasters. And COVID-19 pandemic actually has made it imperative for us to actually bring our central focus now on disasters. Thank you, Chandan sir, for this opportunity. And when you told me, I kept on thinking that, can Chandan sir give me a more difficult assignment than this? Because I had to make a presentation on what more than 400 news channels, national, regional, local channels are doing or have done in the last 16 months, what tens of thousands of newspapers, portals have done and covered pandemic in the last 16 months. And as you know, during lockdown, media, of course, emerged as the primary nodal agent for dissemination of information. And when the other means of mass media production had been stalled because of the nationwide crackdown, national and local and regional news channels, newspapers, not newspapers really, the news portals and social media platforms became the primary agencies through which important information related with COVID-19 was disseminated into the Indian society and to the world at large. Now, this of course has also very, very critical lessons for crisis communication, which is very central to the idea of disaster management. And I'll be, of course, be mentioning that in detail very soon. Now, my first slide, Akhil sir, right. Now, COVID-19 pandemic, as we all know, has posed very, very complex institutional challenges for every institutional enterprise, both in government and private sector, in India and at the global level. And once in a century, COVID-19 pandemic has actually also exposed the structural weaknesses in our response mechanism. Every institution has struggled to adapt to the challenges it has posed. And no one, of course, I can say now, was ready to face such a global pandemic, because this was once in a century phenomena. And at the institutional level, at the local level, at the government level, at the global level, such institutional frameworks were not in place to combat such a pandemic when it actually came knocking at our doors. Next slide. And as you know, and I can tell you as someone who was part of the media institution, that we had to restructure our news gathering processes with requisite safety protocol in a very, very short span of time. Remember, the lockdown was imposed in March, and it did not give us much time to actually put in place our own safety protocols. We were all new to the virus. And I remember when WHO announced that this is a pandemic, I remember I took out my dictionary to find out what exactly pandemic actually means. We had heard about epidemics, but not a pandemic. At least in my personal case, I can tell you that not many of the journalists were actually fully aware of what does a pandemic means. And when we started reporting on the pandemic, from day one, we faced very, very complex ethical and moral issues. And the most central issue that was debated across newsrooms in the country, and also I think in the world, was what to report and what not to report. When one of the first cases of the person who had contracted COVID-19 pandemic, he had just returned from Italy. I remember he lived in Mayur Bihar. We somewhere got his mobile number as well. But then there was a debate that whether we should be actually exposing his identity before the nation. I think that was the third case of corona in India. First, of course, was the Wuhan medical student in Kerala. Second, again, a student who came from Wuhan. Third case, I think, came from Mayur Bihar in Delhi, where a traveler who had a travel history in Europe, especially Italy, which was one of the worst affected countries at that time, he reported COVID positive. And it led to a debate as to how we should cover his case. And I remember a phone-in was done, but his identity was not revealed. And that became a standard protocol because we knew that this person might face social ostracism. Remember, when a pandemic comes, it's a responsibility of the media not to expose the identity of the person who is affected, because not only he, but his entire family can get ostracized. He can face hurdles of different kinds, and even hospitals would be at that point of time extremely wary of dealing with him, because at that time, even hospital administrations did not have a very detailed protocol in terms of handling the COVID cases. And we all know that. Next slide. Now, we also had to reformulate the conventional principles of news coverage. And we did not have much time. And the first challenge, apart from the moral and ethical issues that we faced, were the logistical challenges. Because as you know, reporters had to go out and field. Should we go into a hospital, not go into a hospital? Should we go and interview people who are affected? Should we not go to interview people who are affected? How far should we maintain the distance from common people whom we are to interview? And remember, we were equally vulnerable as any citizen in the world. But we had a duty, solemn duty, to move out of our homes. And I remember on the first day, that was on 25th March 2020, when I took my car out and moved out of my housing society, for 3-4 kilometers, I did not see a single living being roaming out on the streets. Even animals also were not visible. And even the first police checkpost that I came across, I remember from a distance, the policeman told me, okay, media, you can go now. So I took my iCard and I said, sir, you want to check my iCard from a distance? He said, no, it's okay. He was so wary of why this human being has come out on the street, the policeman at the checkpost, and they were all extremely apprehensive about the danger that I posed to them, and consequently they posed to me as well. And I kept on driving for many kilometers, and I did not see a vehicle. India was under complete lockdown. And then these office work protocols started coming to us through emails. There was a sanitization protocol that was put in place in my organization, in all news channels, and office space became a critical central point. Remember, news channels had the extra responsibility of keeping their office work protocol very, very clear, because it would have affected the operations of the newsroom as well. Remember, a news channel, if large number of people report COVID positive, it would start having an impact on how far the news channel can run during a pandemic. And to keep that seamless news gathering operation in place, there were very strict office protocols. And I will get to in detail sometime later. But of course, news gathering process were affected in many news channels. In one news channel, I remember more than 40 people reported positive, and a part of the news operation, the one building, in fact, was completely seized by the authorities. Next. Now look at my boom mic. This is one of the first ground reports I did in a factory. This is Bulandshahr Road Industrial Area, and the person in the screen in blue shirt is Sanjeev Sachdeva, now a very close friend and one of my mentors, in the sense that he taught me how to fight a pandemic. And in the very first interview, he had opened his factory. This is somewhere, I think 30th May, to be precise, 2020. And I was surprised when he said, okay, I'll do the interview. And I said, sir, we'll follow all the COVID protocol. And look at my boom mic and the distance that is there between me and my subject. Normally we are much closer, but here I had a long boom mic and I was maintaining a 6 feet distance from him. And we did the interview, and you can see his factory is almost empty. There were 15 to 20% workforce that had reported on duty when the unlock phase started, especially for the smaller industries. Next slide. Now, this is, of course, another picture of a boom mic. This is NDRF DG. And as you know, as students of disaster, we all know that India had to face a series of cyclones in the last 2 years. After the nationwide lockdown was imposed, and starting with May till the last cyclone Yas, we have faced many cyclones, and I can tell you that even in the NDRF control room where this interview was done, NDRF DG also initially suggested that we should do an online interview, but I insisted that I wanted to shoot his control room, and with a lot of difficulty, he said, okay, you can come. We did this interview, but look at my boom mic and the kind of challenges that India faced in the last 16 months from these series of cyclones that we faced was also enormous and a different subject to study. Next slide. This is the cabinet briefing room. As you can see, Prakash Javadekar is doing the cabinet. And how many journalists can you see in this picture? I can see 3 camera units here, right? 3 camera units. Normally there are 40, 50 camera units, but you can see in this image, there were only 3 camera units. And the distance between 2 people sitting in this room will give you an idea as to what kind of protocol we had to put in place to keep ourselves safe and also the minister safe. Next slide. Now, this gives you a much better idea as to how many people were there in the briefing room, which is the capacity of, I think, more than 100 journalists, but you can only count them. There were some 15, 20 people. And this was a standard protocol throughout the COVID protocol, especially during the second wave as well, which was much more lethal and deadly for us. Next slide. Now, in terms of the issues highlighted during the second wave, there were lots of similarities in terms of the issues that we covered in the first wave and also in the second wave. But they were distinct also in the sense that media's primary focus, as we all know, in the first wave was on stringent nationwide lockdown, reverse migration by migrant workers, unprecedented economic crisis, and unemployment. These were central issues that were raised the most in the first wave. But in the second wave, next slide, the issues changed. And as you know, when the numbers started increasing enormously, the shortage of oxygen became the big national story. And we all know that the use of medical oxygen, liquid medical oxygen, was stopped in many, many industries. Well, there were exceptions as well to ensure that large part of the liquid oxygen could be immediately transported to the big urban centers, to hospitals and COVID care centers to address the shortage of hospital beds, failures of health infrastructure when the second wave at its peak. And India, of course, was under stress as most of the countries in the world were, including the most advanced countries. And as you know, if a country reports more than 400,000 cases for a few days, you can understand the enormous stress that puts on the infrastructure. There was also issue of vaccination-related issues, shortage and slow pace, and this is one issue which India is still debating now. Next stage, next slide. Now, this is one of the first reports that we did, and I can tell you this is an interesting insight. I was covering the counting day of counting of votes in 5 different assembly elections. I was in headquarters and news came that our children's hospital in Saket has run out of oxygen, and the owner has put out a tweet saying, we have oxygen only for next 2 hours. And lives of large number of patients in this hospital was at risk. And I was actually diverted. That's one of the incredible moments of my journalistic career, that on a day when the counting of vote was going on in BJP, I was diverted from the BJP headquarters to report on an oxygen shortage story. And that shows the larger focus of the media. We did not play up much as we would have done in normal time on how the counting of vote was progressing. And of course, the medical crisis, the oxygen crisis became the top story for us. Next slide. This is another image of the decision by Prime Minister to set up 551 oxygen plants in district headquarters across the country. And this was one of the first major decisions to actually augment the ability of district hospitals to supply oxygen during a pandemic. This is one of the big lessons that India has learned. And now I think in most of the district headquarters, a provision, the process of setting up their own oxygen plant is now underway. Next slide. Now we all know Oxygen Express was launched. Tens of thousands of metric ton of medical oxygen was transported through rail, air, road route from industrial centers. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself took charge of the situation. And I remember I have covered Prime Minister's office for a very long time. Most of the meetings in that phase, when India was facing the oxygen crisis, Prime Minister took charge of himself, and he took series of meetings with chief ministers, district officials, to guide them in how to address the oxygen crisis. And as you know, large number of deaths were reported. Crematoriums came under intense scrutiny, and we have all seen those horrifying images of crematorium full of bodies being in the waiting line, and in national and international media that became an image of the degree of the crisis India was facing. Next slide. Now, this is one of the image of the Prime Minister chairing a meeting with officials. And as you know, you can see Cabinet Secretary in this image, and there is Health Secretary. And there's a lot of brainstorming was happening. We got a big national crisis, and the media's main focus during the second corona wave was actually on oxygen and health crisis, especially the crisis of infrastructure. Next slide. Now, one message from Prime Minister to the Chief Ministers that we must be united. And that's the one message that government always tried to give to the states. And we know that to a very large extent, the states and the center, they work together to actually tide over this crisis, which was unprecedented. I can tell you as a ground reporter, the kind of horrifying images we have seen on the ground outside hospitals. Next slide. Then the cyclone crisis. Now, remember, fighting a cyclone during a pandemic actually doubles the challenge, because all the cyclone shelters that we had along the coastal areas, they could not actually put people as per their capacity. And the directives were issued by NDRF and NDMA and also Government of India Home Ministry that you can only put 50% of the people in a cyclone shelter to ensure that the COVID social distancing protocol was put in force. And that was the big challenge that we faced. And we see, this is one of the aerial images of Prime Minister doing an aerial survey of Gujarat. And he also announced the first quantum of relief to Gujarat. And we reported intensively how the ground reports were done at that time. And media's focus, of course, was intensely on cyclone, especially on how that affected the supply of oxygen, because most of these coastal states, Goa, Kerala, Gujarat, Maharashtra, they were also worst affected states from COVID-19. And that's why the challenge had doubled for India during this crisis. And media's focus also was centered on this. Next slide. Another image of the NDRF DG interview and the cyclone, Taute. Next slide. Now, what are the lessons now that it poses? It poses a big lesson for India in terms of how the crisis communication protocol is in national interest during such a pandemic. And this is, I think, something that India needs to work. It's a work in progress. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. I was checking the figures. We still have 11,21,000 active cases in the country. More than 90,000 new cases have been reported in the last 24 hours. And this is a lesson in work. And this is that we have to collecting data, keep working on the lessons this pandemic has posed for us. And one of the big lessons of this crisis that media also has debated very intensely is the significance of a proactive crisis communication protocol at state, national, and global levels. Now here, the failure of the big developed countries like United States and Italy becomes very, very important. And as you know, initially we used to report, and I used to study the WHO data. They had two sets of data initially, one for China, one for the rest of the world. And China at one time was reporting 90% of the cases. And the world kept silently watching China fall to COVID-19. And gradually, when the safety protocols were delayed by these developed countries, we saw COVID spread massively in different parts of the world. And I think that's the one big lesson. The crisis communication protocol in the United States, Italy, India were not at par with what should have been. And that's where the world kept watching China to actually fall to COVID-19, but did not take the preventive measures on time. And that's why most developed countries with most high-tech infrastructure for health services became the worst victims during this crisis. And this is one big lesson of how big nations need to actually communicate with its citizens, put in place viable crisis communication protocols, and how the media and social media institutions can play a very, very central role in setting up an efficacious crisis communication protocol at national and global level. Next slide. Now, this was also the worst and the most challenging phase of the worst public health emergency in India's history. And we have seen media highlight a point that I also mentioned a while ago, the major gaps in terms of the shortage of beds in hospitals, COVID care centers, alerted agencies across the country in terms of the shortage of critical medicines, oxygen, health equipment to treat patients. And we know a large number of measures were initiated to ensure that more and more health equipment could be imported at much lesser rates. Duties were reduced across the spectrum. Even we are hearing there's another GST Council meeting happening tomorrow. Ground is being readied for perhaps a cut in some of the GST rates on critical COVID-related materials, including vaccines, other medicines that are needed, infrastructure, ventilators, oxygen cylinders, oxygen concentrators, and all that. Next. Now, we all know, and this is where I think we need to have a central role, codify a central role for what media should do during such a crisis communication situation. And as we all know, during the lockdown, TV news channels, newspapers, web portals, radio networks, and social media platforms emerged as the central nodal points to disseminate important information about the threat that coronavirus pandemic posed to the masses. And I remember wherever I went, there were hundreds of people who came to me to ask me hundreds of questions about supply of free food grains, to how they can keep themselves safe, as to when the rail network, the air network is going to be opened up, the people stranded in different cities, the migrant workers crisis. It was a national crisis that I've seen in the last 16 months unfold. I think we're still in the midst of a pandemic and we have to remain alert. Next slide. Now, what COVID-19 crisis has also done is to expose the weaknesses in the existing public health communication systems, even in the most powerful and advanced countries of the world. And at a larger level, the COVID-19 pandemic is of course expected to restructure and reform the world of crisis communication itself. And here I will mention that industry has a very, very critical role. As you all know, in big urban centers, most of the workforce is employed in the industry. And industry has a very, very central role to play in putting in place such viable public health communication systems, the office protocols inside the factories, inside the office space needs to be strengthened. We have to put in place a very viable work at home strategy. What has happened now is largely an ad hoc measures employed depending on the state of the COVID pandemic. And most importantly, it is also expected, this pandemic, to transform how these systems actually work and how these can be strengthened in terms of how companies interact with its employees, the state interacts with its citizens, and even the village level institutions interact with normal villagers on the ground. Next slide. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, covering an epidemic is potentially very, very hazardous. And this is hazardous for not only COVID warriors, but even journalists who have to work on the field. And we know that to address this challenge, tenets of disaster journalism have become extremely important. Journalists have followed special protocol. I've shown you the images for reporting that they have to maintain requisite distance from the subject they have covered, use more and more boom mics, carry all COVID protective gear with themselves. And I remember in my car, in office cars, we have a COVID gear dress always in place. Sanitizers, of course, is very, very common, and medicines and all other self-protection gear that is needed. And large number of media personnel are also working from home, especially those who are working in our web portals, in .coms. They are working largely from home in the last 16 months, and only specialized reporters covering health ministry, hospitals, police and emergency services have been deployed in the field. And large number of my friends have fallen to COVID-19. I remember in a private news channel, at one time, a friend told me more than 70% reporters have fallen to COVID-19. And that significantly impacted their news gathering operations. And of course, they need to put in place now, all the organizations in media or any other organization or enterprise, parameters of a risk assessment plan is very, very important in terms of how you keep your office staff safe, how you keep your office space safe, how you take care of those of your own employees who fall ill, what kind of medical support, health insurance support organizations can provide. We need to have a protocol ready to fight such disasters in future. Now, I think a couple of last points, Vibhav sir. Next slide. Now we all know migrant workers crisis is one of a very, very defining crisis of this COVID phases, both phases, first phase, second phase. Second phase, of course, most of the economic activity is kept open. So the migrant workers crisis was not so acute as in the first phase. But we know that this migrant workers crisis and all the ground reports that I've done in the field, I remember large number of entrepreneurs, especially small factory owners, MSME units, have complained that they have faced shortage of workers. Because when you impose a stringent lockdown, the shortage of trained workers, remember all these MSME units, they need trained staff. If there's a shoe manufacturing unit, they need workers who are trained in making shoes. If there is a high-tech automated systems factory, they need workers who are trained in doing that kind of work. You just can't put and ask workers from the road and ask them to start working on the ground. And this is the kind of challenge India is facing. Look at these figures. This is one of the first presentation by Rural Development Secretary sometime in June, I think, last year, when he put in place first data on what was the quantum of the reverse migration that we saw in the first phase. And as you can see, 116 districts itself accounted for more than 67 lakh migrant workers. That was approximately 2/3 of the returning migrant. That essentially means that the first estimate government had 2 months after the most stringent lockdown, more than around 1 crore migrant workers returned to their homes. And you can see the state-wise data. UP and Bihar, one of the worst affected states, and you can see 116 districts were affected. And these 1 crore migrant workers, they vacated the space in the factories, which took many months for these factories actually to, recoup from this shortage of workers. They took many, many months to come back. And through all these months, these factories where these workers were earlier employed in urban industrial centers across the country, the business operations, the factory operations, industry operations are badly affected. Next slide. Now, this is the figure which was tabled in Parliament on 8th February 2021. At that time, the COVID second wave had not come. And the Minister for Labour and Employment, Santosh Gangwar, presented this data which said 1 crore 14 lakh 30,968. Remember, these are official Government of India figures. This is the large number of migrant workers who returned to their home states. And remember the space that these people have vacated in the industry. These are people earlier employed in the organized industries, because this is a data of those workers who were registered. And remember, UP, 32 lakh 49,000 workers returned to Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, more than 15 lakh. And that shows the large quantum of the economic crisis which industry faced during this phase. Next slide. Of course, you can see the statewide figures. I think, Rubab, so we can share this with the participants. They can just study this data. And remember, this is what happens when you put a nationwide lockdown. And this is how it affects the industry. Whether it is FICCI, I remember lots of reports FICCI has on this, CII, ASSOCHAM, all industry associations have put these details in public domain before the government also. Next slide. Now, what is the quantum of the migrant workers crisis now? As per economic survey, the magnitude of interstate migration in India annually between 2011 and 2016 is close to 90 lakh. Now, imagine every year, 90 lakh interstate migrants, they move to cities to work. And when you impose a lockdown, and I remember last 16 months, large part of India has been under lockdown except the beginning of this year when the industries were opened across the country. And of course, this is the large quantum of migrants that were badly affected when industries remained closed. And the transport was also stopped. Next slide. One of the first images of Embassy restaurant. Embassy is a very famous restaurant chain in Connaught Place. And as you can see, there's a shot from the first floor. This is how restaurants looked like during the second wave. And I did lots of ground reports on hospitality industry. Remember, hospitality industry is one of the worst affected. I remember a manager, ITC former chairman, once told me that, remember, Himanshu, when you're doing your reports, it is the hospitality industry, the tourism industry, the restaurants, the hotels, which are the first which are closed when a pandemic comes. And we are the last who are allowed to open our gates. So we are the worst affected. I remember one interview I did, he said more than 5 lakh crore is the estimated loss in revenue for hospitality and hotel industry. That's the quantum of loss that this industry is staring now. And I think I have done lots of ground reports. This is one image that shows that what would happen to these workers, poor workers who work in these restaurant chains in big cities. And I can tell you, they have still not recovered. I think in the last couple of days, there is slight improvement during the unlock phase now has opened up. But remember, this specter of the cloud of COVID is still hanging on their heads. Now, last couple of slides, Akhil sir. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. This is an All India Survey of Migrant Workers has just started. One of the first effort at the national level to actually count the number of migrant workers. Remember, when a pandemic comes, it is the migrant workers who suffer the most. And at the moment, even to give them the social welfare benefit of social welfare policies, the large number of them are still not registered. So once you have a national register of migrant workers, both the industry and the government can then formulate their response strategy if such a lockdown had to be imposed in future to fight a pandemic, because then we will have a very organized data in terms of what is the quantum of migrant workers who need support from the industry and how we can allow and ensure that they can remain in the factory premises, live there and continue with the work as they did during the second wave. That's the one big lesson that we have learned, that at the construction site, special arrangements are made so the workers don't have to travel from their homes. They remain at the construction site, and with social distancing protocol, large number of construction work has continued in the second wave. This is one big lesson that we have learned, and this is something that I can report on the basis of my ground reports. Next slide. Next slide. These are the measures announced by the government. Of course, law is also now being put in place to put in occupational safety protocol through these labor codes that have been passed. Next slide. Now, of course, large number of measures were taken by the government to help alleviate the job crisis in districts. And I can see a large number of 25 target-driven works were started, and millions of people benefited from this by the efforts of the government. And this is, of course, one of the protocol that has to be followed to fight such pandemics in future. One of the lessons India has learned, how to augment labor and job opportunities during a pandemic. Next slide. Next slide. SDGs, of course, have become important sustainable development goals. And these are some of the images of my own ground report. I remember when Delhi went under night curfew, suddenly large number of migrant workers started moving to the bus stations, railway stations, because they had a fear that this perhaps will again prolong. And it reminded them about the first wave of the migration that happened. And I personally reported large number of people now moving, trying to just move out of Delhi before the curfew was put in place. Next slide. Next slide. Migrant workers went back to their villages, but in many districts, even the work under Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme was stopped because of lockdown that affected people. Next slide. Now, SDG targets, of course, as you all know, have become more and more difficult because this pandemic has affected the revenue generation of the state. And that in turn, of course, has made these targets more important, but also at the same time more difficult for the state to achieve. Next slide. Next slide. These are the targets: food security, hunger, unemployment. These are challenges that pandemic has posed before us. I think last slide has come. Yes, and as they take part with you with one couple of images of what media needs to do. Now, that would mean more research on what I have just discussed. Now, these are just primary details that I've shared with you, and I think I need to do and collect all my experience into a research paper. And in the middle of this pandemic, good news came that this book, which was a work in progress for 16 months, was published by Springer Singapore, Media and Disaster Risk Reduction, in which I had a chapter. The next slide. This is based on the challenges I faced in covering the Kashmir floods. And the challenges that reporters face in news gathering, of course, is one big challenge. And this is why I titled my paper, Challenges of News Gathering in a Disaster Zone, a study of Jammu and Kashmir floods. Now, this pandemic, I can tell you as a reporter, has posed a much, much greater challenge for journalists. And I think we need to research more. Reporters should research more. Industry has to research more. Government has to collect more data. And remember, one big lesson this pandemic has posed for us, that we must not forget the lessons that this pandemic has posed before us. We did not take the Spanish flu of 1918 very seriously when 14 to 17 million Indians died. And remember, we still don't have a national law on a pandemic. So I think a large number of lessons we have for the industry, government, journalists, media institutions, we must collectively learn so that we have a viable national protocol to fight such a pandemic in future. Thank you, Rubab sir, and thank you, Chandan sir, for this opportunity. These are just primary details I can share. We're still in the midst of a crisis, still a great learning experience for us. But I thought that these are facts that I should share before you so that it helps you deliberate on the larger agenda that this pandemic has put before our nation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Himanshu. Thank you. I think we're all spellbound with the the startling details, the data, and what is more authentic than a report from the ground. I think there is nothing which can really replace that sort of authenticity. Sach dikhate hain hum. I think that is embedded in your philosophy as NDTV, because when we want to find or we want to look for any sort of truth, jo such aapka tagline hai, I think we switch on to NDTV as community. We all come together. We share screenshots of your reporting, of your fellow reporters. जब data कोई NDTV की screen पे आता है, तो that becomes an image which is circulated in social media. I'm afraid I can't say that for other TV channels, but not because you are here with us, but I think we are being very honest, and this is a platform where only very senior, highly professional and renowned resources have taken out time, and you are definitely one of them. Some very, very important hard-hitting facts, advice, suggestions have come out of your presentation. You briefly mentioned about the GST Governing Council meeting, which is going on as we speak. FICCI has come forward and shared some very valuable recommendations to the government, which we've been doing all throughout this pandemic, and we are very happy and glad that government has taken serious note of those recommendations, because they know, I think it is the time when all stakeholders have never come together so closely to deal with the crisis. And I think pandemic has actually has broken a lot of barriers. It has brought everyone together, and this is what I think I'm not afraid in saying that this is the beauty of a crisis. It brings everyone together. And you mentioned about the pandemic law, and I think on that we are highly confident that with suggestions like these, with intervention of different stakeholders, that is not a far-off dream. That would definitely come in place. The National Disaster Management Authority came into being when tsunami happened. If we all remember, I mean, September Disaster Management Act 2005, it was a push from the international community to form an authority which was autonomous in nature. And so there are certain push which is required. I remember when I was working with the West Midlands Ambulance Service in England in 2003, there was a deliberation on managing the consequences of a deliberate release of chemical, biological, and radiological agents. November 2003, I was part of that training, 2-day training in Birmingham, and media was an important stakeholder on that training table. And there was a 2-hour session of BBC and other channels which were really contributing to the entire policy framework of emergency planning in England. And I think this is moving forward. We all would witness that with experts like you and with credible with such credible knowledge and especially from the ground. I'm sure we have a better and a more prepared future moving forward as a country. Thank you so much, Himanshuji, for your amazing, brilliant intervention. Thank you so much. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Ghosh, for your comments.
Just he has elaborated not as a just like a arm media, but he has pointed out several things, especially about the migrant labor database. So which we do not have, like more than 1 crore 14 lakh migrant laborers are there, we didn't know. And so there is, he through his presentation, in fact, he has highlighted that how crucial it is to have this kind of thing, despite we are having Aadhaar and PAN card or ration cards and so many IDs that we are having. Along with that, even mobile number is also unique number. Despite having so many numbers, then I think country have to work together here to have this kind of database together. Keeping aside NRC or other things, whatever is going on in another front, but keeping this kind of labor database, especially for the industries, this program, this platform there, and that how important it is and what they have lost due to movement of this skilled labor that who have been working in the factories and various places. So to get back that, of course, it is a huge loss. In addition to that, he has highlighted many other things, especially the hospitality industry that they have faced. I think, Ribab, we have to go for a separate 3 days such kind of program, capsule program in hospitality industry, what kind of problem they have faced. Like this one, only industries that we are looking into. Then I think with this, we should focus on this kind of area, what experts are suggesting us to look forward in this area. And he has also shown even the photographs or his, like we have all talked about when vaccine came, where Professor Kamath is, Professor Kamath, we are welcoming to you. Just only thing is that when we thought of, giving vaccine to the frontline workers, health workers and everyone, police and doctors, and also media also was there, is it? No.
Initially it was not there, later.
Later it came, huh? Okay. So you see, they have to cover every one of these who are frontline workers in the beginning of giving this vaccine in the month of when it has started in January. So the kind of industry kind of things that we are focusing, where two of our Deepak Pandeyji and Rituraj Mehta ji has explained about that how they took their organization wise, industry wise, that how they took care of COVID situation. So here also he has focused about that in the media where they have to go to every front, hospital and everywhere. They have to cover all of them that who are because they have to collect the information, put it to the public. So that is one challenging thing that you have. Rather in common sense, generally it doesn't come up in our mind. But I think really you have shown many of these aspects that where we have to work together, and especially showing that how a cabinet meeting is going on and who are the people are there, and see that how protocol is being maintained. So that is also an eye opener. Thank you very much.
Great. I think the last 1 hour really well spent, and I can assure all our attendees who are right now commenting on the great inputs which Himanshuji has shared with them. Let me assure you that we have 3 more very hard-hitting presentations coming forward, and this is I must compliment Dr. Ghosh, Professor Ghosh for getting together all such eminent speakers. Whatever we could contribute in that as the disaster risk management team at FICCI, we did. But I think the lead was of Dr. Ghosh, and we are so fortunate to be working with him in partnership, to build these capacities. Thank you, Himanshu ji. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
We will be in touch, and we need leaders like you, to lead from the front and keep us, informed with all these very important on-ground issues of the country. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, moving on, we have a very, very important presentation next by Dr. Ramachandra Kamath, Professor and Head, Department of Community Medicine, Kodagu Institute of Medical Sciences, Karnataka. He would be speaking on public health and vaccination and outlook for the future. Let me tell you, all is present with us. I'm just quickly, there are almost 150 people odd connected here at WebEx and many more on our live YouTube channel. But this presentation of Dr. Kamath did answer a lot of questions which were there in my mind previously, and I'm sure I'll be more informed once we witness his presentation today. Dr. Kamath, thank you so much for joining us on this online training program. I will hand over to you now for your intervention for the day, for public health and vaccination related clarity and information. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Kamath.
Yeah, can I share my slides?
Yes, go on.
Yes, you can, Dr. Kamath. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the slides are visible, sir?
Yes, yes, Dr. Kamath, we can see it.
Yeah, I'll start. Okay, thank you. A very good afternoon. I think here it is raining, so if any network issues, please tell me in advance. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghosh and Mr. Sir. And we had a very nice presentation, Mr. Himanshu, and we are going from communication to, I think, vaccination now. We have seen last March 2020 to this June 2021, we have seen the scenario, past and current. We have seen the suffering, and we have seen different sectors, how much there is a damage, loss, and many things. Last thing, I think what we saw is shortages of. Okay, so there was a shortage of many things, especially in the health sectors, drug shortage, bed shortage, oxygen shortage, so many issues we had. So that is why I think this is one of the biggest public health emergency in the history. We have seen a lot of disruption everywhere, not only health, even education, economic, and there was special progress. A lot of cases, I think numbers are increasing. First wave, second wave, and even we had a very high death rate during the second wave. A lot of things came, okay, so which we were not aware in before March 2020. A lot of guidelines, a lot of SOPs, all this quarantine, isolation, diagnostics, a lot of diagnostics issues came, and a lot of treatment guidelines, and everybody was eager to see the vaccine. Okay, so I think that was the stage, not to hear about vaccine. So everybody, all public wanted to see the vaccine, and finally, I think they wanted to take vaccine. We had a lot of hurdles when this came, and I'll briefly explain. And there was a very urgent need. So I think recently our Honorable Prime Minister said, we are giving a vaccine and we are covering entire country population, and we will immunize them, we will protect, and we will have a corona-free country. Okay, so maybe after 80 to 90% vaccine coverage. And when vaccine came, also there was a lot of issues like whether I can take it, whether it is safe, and whether it gives protection, whether it produces antibodies. So many issues came initially, and finally, vaccine came, and it is proved now by different scientific research, and so many papers are there now. And vaccine is very good and very safe. It will prevent infection, it will prevent disease, it will prevent complications, prevent hospitalization, and even prevent death. So I think it is now 100% is very clear. And most important here is vaccination is recommended for persons with comorbidities also. So I think when I talked about vaccine, I'll highlight this. Okay, so even people with comorbid, because they are the most vulnerable people. They're the first one to get disease. I think even they are also fully protected if they take both doses, first and second dose in time. I think if you see history, vaccination means prevention. Prevention is better than cure. And this is a 100% result. We don't get any result, any 100% result in any intervention. Okay, so only vaccination we get 100% result. For example, one dose of measles vaccine, okay, so gives around 90% protection, a lifelong immunity. So what is required here is when vaccine introduced in India in emergency basis, okay, and initially people were reluctant to take. Okay, so that because of the lack of information and scientific facts were not distributed or not communicated properly to the public. That was the reason. That is why even the health professionals also initially there was some hesitancy to take vaccine. And what we expect is maybe by the end of December 2021, okay, so at least 70 to 80% of the population is covered. We will get good herd immunity. That means even unvaccinated people also protected just because of this herd immunity. So we are protecting here all public, even herd. And third is even those who are not taken, okay, so they are also protected because of the very good vaccination coverage that is up to 80%. I don't want to talk about all this because how many cases, and even India was in the second. Initially, India was not there, and as the days passes, I think India was there even in the number of cases and even in the number of deaths. So many vaccines were there in the trial. 92 candidate vaccines. Okay, so they all are in the trial. Okay, so and many other platforms are joined, and vaccines were started, and manufacturing units have started with their production in the different platform. Okay, so either it is a inactivated vaccine or mRNA vaccine like Pfizer, and replicating viral vector vaccine, and replicating viral vector. So many platforms, I think many manufacturing units have started their work after their phase 1 to phase 3 clinical trials. And normally, any vaccine, if you want to start or if you want to produce, I think they have to go through these stages, these phases. I think it is mandatory. First, you do this in the animal experiment in the lab. Then you do phase 1 clinical trial with a few participants. Then you do the phase 2 clinical trial, maybe around 50 to 100 participants, where you want to see the antibody production and how much it protects. And phase 3 is clinical trial. Large number of people are participating, and you are really testing actual protection of the vaccine. Now, all ages. I think in near future, this we are achieving it. Only now we are waiting pregnancy and less than 18 years of age group. Some developed countries already started this process. And the contraindication, we shouldn't have any contraindication for vaccination. Then only achieve that 80% herd immunity. And all vaccines should have normally 80% efficacy. And here, as I said, there are so many vaccines are now currently available. Most of them are having more than 70% efficacy. Means they really protect people. And durability of protection. Okay, so this is again a question asked, sir, if I take now, okay, so how much protection it gives, whether it's 1 year or 6 months or 2 years. Okay, so I think it's already proved it gives protection more than a year. And as I said, all vaccines are safe. There is enough antibody production. All we have learned through research. And these are the vaccines are available today. So virus vaccine in activated form. We have viral vector vaccine, so genetically engineered method they use, a nucleic acid vaccine and protein-based vaccine. This is very simple and very systematically done. Okay, so vaccine flows from the center to the region to side. Okay, so it is very interesting to see this, and the only thing is to maintain this vaccine to disintegrate. I think now it is a rainy season, so we don't have such issues, and we need few gadgets. Only some of the Iceland refrigerator, hockey cooler. We need a few different gadgets. We have every district, every primary health center, they have this gadget. So that is why we could do this vaccination and at the rural and urban, and I think we started this process everywhere. So, and the government has given emergency permission. Okay, so after their clinical trial, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, so Serum Institute of India and Bharat Biotech, so both vaccines I think people are taking now. So Covishield, okay, so from the Serum Institute of India, and then Covaxin from the Bharat Biotech. So both are very good. I don't think so. If somebody asks whether I can take this or that, I think both vaccines are the same. Okay, so it's like coffee and tea. So coffee lovers will take coffee, tea lovers will take tea. Okay, so then again, people may ask which tea is better. So I think that's why I said all vaccines are safe because they use different platforms, and most of the vaccines. Okay, so even the dose is 0.5 ml intramuscular currently available, and only I think a newer vaccine may come only the one dose. That is why. So I think all the public, what I want to say is all the vaccines are safe. Just, we can't compare because it's different platforms, and they give enough antibody production, and there is efficacy. So that is why almost all the vaccines are safe. Coming to the COVID-19 vaccination, I think it was launched in 16th January. I think first it was given to the sanitation worker. So I think this is what I think we should learn. Who is the vulnerable, most vulnerable? Okay, so least vulnerable. So that is why they had this vaccination for phase 1 for healthcare workers and frontline workers. Then phase 2, person aged above 60 years and 45 to above 45 with comorbidity. And now it is 18 to 44 years. Very systematically designed, and they have identified who is most vulnerable. They've covered. Then they said, okay, so go for elderly. They are also very vulnerable. Then they said 45 and above with the comorbidity, and we are having the 18 to 44 now. Even the setup is, I think, very clear. There is just go to the vaccination site. There is a waiting room, vaccination room, and observation room. Only initially some probably issues were there because of the app. Okay, so I know we are in digital world now, but it is not percolated to rural and other areas. So there is a little some issues were there with the COVID app. Okay, so, but I think now that problem is also solved. We can go on the spot also. We can go and register. So all very nicely designed. Who will do what? Vaccination officer 1 will do what? He will registration. Vaccination officer 2 will do the all authentication. Okay, so any one document is like Aadhaar card, anything. And vaccination officer 2, he will respond for the crowd management. Vaccination officer will take the entire that session site. So I have visited many vaccination sites, and very nice to see people coming elderly, disabled with the comorbidity. So and they are very happy when they enter and when they leave the vaccination site, because they are very sure that okay, now at least I have 70 to 80% protection. Okay, so I am the breadwinner. Okay, so I am protected now, so that I can protect others. I think that is a good idea. And this is the number, how many frontline workers, healthcare workers, 18 to 45 vaccinated. And I think very good. The only thing is initially we had little issues. So I think now there is a lot of demand. So I think demand and production, there is a competition between these two. So I think production level increases automatically. There is when there is a demand also, we can take care of that. Both vaccines are liquid based and it is given intramuscular. Okay, so normally we give first to the left arm, then we can give it to the right arm. Normally we use left because right, always we are mostly right-handed people, so they prefer left hand, left arm first, then second dose maybe the right hand. And the 2-dose schedule and 0.5 ml. And the vial comes, it is a multi-dose vial, not like I think measles, other vaccines, tetanus toxins come in a single dose. So here it is multi-dose vial. So that is why once you open it, so you have to use within 4 hours. If after 4 hours we have to discard this vaccine. That is why I think there was a lot of wastage in the sense once you open and only one person comes, okay, so 9 doses are wasted. So that was the issue was there initially. I think now that problem is solved. So both are free sensitive vaccine, and there is no heat sensitive indicator. That VVM is vaccine while monitor. Heat sensitive indicator is not there in this. And as I said, open while policy. So after 4 hours, please discard it. Otherwise, it can create serious illness. And the first in, first out. So you see the expiry date and all that, manufacture date, and use the first in, first out. COVID vaccination strategy has been formulated as per the government guidelines, and vaccines are developed using multiple platforms. I have discussed protein-based, nucleic acid-based, all this. And beneficiary must complete vaccination schedule using same vaccine product. Okay, so I can't change. I will take now Covishield and next Covaxin. Second dose Covishield. Anyway, research and research are going on. So whether we can mix or not. So I think we'll wait for the results. Actually, there is no contraindication. Okay, so the people who say, okay, so I have some allergic to some drugs. Okay, so I think they can take advice from the doctor for taking. Otherwise, absolutely, there is no contraindication. And pregnancy, so trial is going on, and the children trial is going on, and lactation, I think it is proved now. So lactating mothers can take the vaccine. Then next is I think provisional contraindication. Okay, so people have a lot of doubts. Okay, so and there is a confusion. So people may say I have active symptoms of SARS. Okay, so COVID symptoms. What to do? So what he can do is he can wait. Okay, so we can postpone it 4 to 8 weeks after recovery. Yesterday I had one call saying that sir, I have taken vaccine and now I am positive. Okay, so can I take second dose? So wait 4 to 8 weeks. Okay, so after your recovery, then you can take the second dose. Patients who has been taken plasma therapy, I think they can also wait because they were in the hospital. They can also wait for some time. And those who are hospitalized, seriously ill, they can also wait for some time. They can take doses later. The following conditions not at all contraindication. Okay, so person with a past history of COVID. Okay, so I was positive. Rat positive, I was RT-PCR positive, you can take vaccine. Okay, so then people say I have that kidney problem, I have cardiac problem. Okay, so all this is a very good. I think I'm very happy that all the comorbidity people are covered in the vaccination. If you have any comorbidity like hypertension, diabetes, anything, okay, so they can take vaccine. Even HIV patients can take vaccine. Then one issue came is about the blood donation. Okay, so can I donate blood after whether COVID positive, or can I take vaccine after COVID positive? I think these are the issues. Government made it very clearly that 14 days after receiving each or any dose of the currently available COVID vaccine, they can do the blood donation. So what they use is every vaccine. I think you can see here image of the virus. Okay, so they most of the vaccines they used that outermost that spike protein. Okay, so I think that was the one they used. Most of the manufacturer they use that spike protein. So similar to COVID virus. Okay, so and some vaccine platform they use the genetic material, they inactivated it. Okay, so it's all I think mostly related to the virus outermost protein or genetic materials. And they used to introduce this to the human body, and people used to develop antibodies. So Covishield, I think I told both Covishield and Covaxin. I told about the dose and when to take first and second dose and how to store all this. I think I have explained already. Coming to, I think this is the one is most important. This is through the clinical trials. Okay, so at the 6 weeks, it gave around 53% protection. At 6 to 8 weeks, it gave 51%. At around 9 to 11 weeks, 60%. That's what I said. any vaccine. Okay, normally we expect more than 50%. So here, I think after 12 weeks, there is 78% protection. So I said, what are the things to follow when you give vaccine? At least 70% efficacy. So I think most of the vaccines are having this more than 70% efficacy. Coming to antibody production. Okay, so this is the, I think a lot of debate was there. So when you take vaccine on day 29, okay, so second dose, so there is a 93% protection. When you take it on 57th day, okay, so after the first dose, there is 97%. So that is why I said all vaccines are safe, very good antibody production, very good efficacy, and very good protection. So this is all, I think, through the research we came to know. And if you see the safety data, we never had any major serious untoward incidents after giving vaccination. Okay, so we had only the mild. Okay, so it's all like uncommon. The common here is only the few people had nausea. Okay, so few people had. I think normally there is a tenderness site of vaccination. Fever will be there for 2 days, and you will have little myalgia, there's muscle pain, and tiredness for only 2 or 3 days maximum. And we can use our paracetamol or Dolo 650 to relieve this. So that is why I said we had very common is pain and tiredness, okay, and pain at the injection site. Otherwise, we never had anything related to the blood, okay, so or nutrition or nervous system. Covaxin, again, this is also weakened or inactivated virus. So they introduce the human body and it produces antibodies. So it never inactivated, which doesn't cause a disease. It produces only antibodies. Covaxin again same. Okay, so dose, route, multivial, all policies are same. Untoward incidents. Okay, so initially a lot of phobia was there and there was a lot of confusion. Everybody, they said, no, I am not taking vaccine. So there was a lot of vaccine supply for each district. And the vaccine site, our staff nurse, everybody, vaccination officer are waiting for the people. Okay, so and the people didn't turn up. And now there is a huge demand. Every vaccination site, I think there's a huge line. Okay, so that is why I said better to share scientific information and we can tell public that is very safe and we can take and we can protect. It gives protection for individual level, family level, even at the community level. As I said earlier, okay, so only minor side effects were there, pain and little muscle pain, and hardly small percentage people had anaphylactic reaction. Okay, so it is very small number. Absolutely, we never had any serious side effects. And what is here important here is all these minor side effects can be managed with a simple paracetamol. And every vaccination site had a kit, anaphylaxis kit for emergency. Okay, so all the vaccination sites, all the people were trained. Every site had anaphylaxis kit to handle all the emergencies, and they're all well trained with 15 to 30 years of experience. So that is why I said, okay, so people can come forward without any having doubts and anything. With confidently, they can come and take vaccine and go back. So this is what normally. So when there is a reaction, we normally assess what is the problem with the respiratory system and cardiovascular and metabolic. So I think there is a medical officer who will take care of all this. There is emergency drugs are there in that kit. Adrenaline is there. Okay, so I think this will take care of all this hypotension, other things. All reaction can be handled. And there is everywhere. Okay, so there's one medical officer and attached to the primary health center or any health facility. So there is a management center. All adverse effects following immunization. So there is one center to manage all this, and ambulance, everything's kept ready. Drugs are kept ready. Medical officer is in touch. Okay, so this is like a very systematic way of giving vaccination. Then every vaccination has different phases. One is preparatory phase. I think I have gone through that. Then during vaccination, I talked about the vaccination site. People are coming, taking, and the vaccination officer working and staff nurse giving vaccine. Then post introduction of evaluation after vaccination, what will happen? So a lot of studies is going on now. Okay, so after first dose, what is the antibody production? After second dose, what is the antibody production? So all this research is going on. Now, I think when you start any new vaccine, it is very clear. There will be a vaccine hesitancy. There is a vaccine fear. So this is very common. We have seen this when we gave measles, mumps, rubella vaccine for adolescents. So many schools we went and we announced in the school. Okay, so MMR is very safe vaccine, and finally, I think there was a demand. So here also we are having same thing. There is initially vaccine hesitancy, and finally, when there is enough scientific information, people come forward and take vaccine. So everywhere, I think we have to maintain the quality, its completeness, and accountability. These are the new vaccines. I think the Sputnik already entered India because it is a viral vector using human adenovirus. So I think it is single dose. So Johnson again, new vaccine, Novavax, Moderna. Okay, so many vaccination. I think different platforms. So vaccines are ready. So it will come to market. We're waiting for all the license and other formalities. So maybe by October, a lot of vaccines will come to the market. Phase 1, phase 3. So we are currently going on 18 to 44 years. Phase 4, we will cover pregnant mothers, and phase 5 we will cover children. People may ask why you are covering children later. As I said, above 60, they are most vulnerable. Frontline workers we know, healthcare workers we know. But here in children, they don't have any comorbidity. They are already vaccinated for many viral and bacterial vaccine, and their contact is very minimal. They are at home, okay, and normally they are the most safe. Okay, so in terms of the COVID, okay, so reason here is they already have a lot of antibodies for many viruses and bacteria. And a lot of challenges, any new vaccine. Okay, so when new vaccine comes, then we have to go for a mass campaign. Then we have to select the age group. Then we have to see their morbidities. Then we take care of the elderly, and we have to see any untoward events. All this, I think, a lot of challenges are there. And finally, I think media attention. Please highlight all the positive points. Okay, so what people say, how many are protected, how many are coverage, what was the coverage. Okay, so this is, I think, very good. So we have to go through all these challenges. And to summarize, so pandemic is not yet over. So 2 vaccines got approval, and the Sputnik is already entered. And Covishield and Covaxin, as I said, both are very good, both are safe, produce enough antibody production, and almost all the vaccines in the market today in the developed and developing countries having more than 70% efficacy. And I think what we require here is we had, I think, first session on communication, and I am talking about vaccination. So vaccine is the weapon. Vaccine is the one which will protect people. So they may not get disease. They may not get any complication. I don't think they'll go to hospital if they take 2 doses of vaccine, and they're completely protected. So I think thank you very much, and we all will now unite and we'll work together, and we will have corona-free India in near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramachandra Kamath, ladies and gentlemen. That was Dr. Kamath sharing some insights on the vaccine, its development, the history of how vaccines have been developed over the years, how this emergency vaccine was developed, not only by multiple pharma players who've come forward and developed approved vaccine. There are few more on the anvil. We recently heard Walcard is coming up with another version. They are tying up with one of the vaccine developers, and I think very soon, mid this month, that name will also be out. So I think as far as that capacity is concerned of vaccines, we are getting better by the day. Better capacities are built, better availability. You know, since I think this past Sunday, which was the 6th of June, things have really improved. The free vaccines to be committed, which were committed by the government. I saw it in Delhi, 4 o'clock in the evening. all the vaccine, most of those vaccine centers from 4 o'clock in the evening till midnight on the 6th of June had posted free vaccine slots, all government centers in Delhi. And I think it was 8th when the Prime Minister at 5 o'clock, he came and he made that big announcement. That's also adds a lot of faith to the common man that things are under control. Vaccination, although ideally should have happened or ideally would have been, very beneficial had it happened by the end of August or September. But then, even if you are targeting December, I'm sure it'll be better off considering the sort of the population we have in our country, almost 135, 140 crores. It's a huge, humongous task, but our government is up for it. And those figures which Dr. Kamath shared with us were really very comforting. Also, the information he shares was very comforting as a common man. And I think that's the role of government. That's the role of pharmaceutical industry. And the beauty of this online training program is when we are talking about industries, people might come with a mindset that we are only talking about industries and what should happen in industries. Media is an industry, pharma is an industry, chemical and oil gas, they're also industry. So all those industry players, so in fact, all the important stakeholders have come together to share their knowledge and expertise and best practices on this platform. So I think really privileged to be a part of this. Dr. Ghosh, your comment before we move on to our next speaker.
Just only cursory comment, because what Dr. Kamath has presented, I think the entire participants, we must go through that, and then we become a learner every slide that we go through, because he has surgically, as a doctor and also from public health specialist that as he has presented whatever is the common sense, common people's perspective, whatever is the know-how, knowledge, information, and then finally what he said in the last slide, that vaccine is the weapon. So in order to fight with the virus, we have to go for it. This is this. And we don't know, but vaccine, the virus impact has not yet ended. So that also is one kind of things that when we are going out, mask, without mask, or unlock has started, but we still see that the vaccine has to be taken out, and he has categorically explained each and every type of vaccine which is available here, why they are important, what are their percentage, what is the time gap, everything very lucidly for common people he has made. So nothing more to add this. I would rather say that since this is available in YouTube, our common people, everyone from all walks of life, they should visit and see this this presentation, especially when vaccine, because last time in May, last month, when we are doing COVID second wave, how it is going to impact, at that time, some kind of fear we had in our mind, everyone was going through, and we also never knew that we'll be able to, but now with the vaccine that which has come and the way that it is being presented, and for every one of us, it is an eye opener. So this is what I would say there. And Professor,
thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kamath, for coming this, and sorry for keeping you waiting for almost half an hour. But Basant Matsagar is here. When he entered at right time, I put him a SMS that yes, you please make your other work and then come exactly after half an hour. And Dr. Kamath did the full justification that half an hour the time that he has taken. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, my pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And very good afternoon, Dr. Matsagar. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you. Good to see you again, sir. We hope you're doing well and staying safe. We're really pleased to welcome you on this platform, on this yet another online training program where we are discussing role of industries. And then and your presentation as I'm told, is on industry-specific standards for making medical oxygen and role of IIT Delhi in this entire process. Oxygen has become one of the most spoken words, I think, in the past 6 to 8 weeks, something which would really, shake you from inside, because even in your WhatsApps or SMS, whenever before you open a message, you get the keywords first. And if it was oxygen, people would open that message with a lot of worry. But I think the task force in which you are a key part of that task force, I think the sort of role you are playing, I think that will define the future of our country. And we are so pleased to have you, future of our country, from building better capacity to deal with oxygen supplies. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Vasant Vatsagar, multi-hazard protective structures, fiber reinforced polymers, composite materials, mechanics, structural vibration control in buildings, bridges, liquid storage tanks, offshore platforms, structural dynamics, and earthquake engineering, finite element method, FEM, blast response of structures, wind and fire engineering. These are few of the many topics that Professor Matsagar has expertise in. He has excelled, in these, in the field of these topics. His specialities, include structural engineering, offshore structures, earthquake engineering, seismicity, and civil engineering. We are very pleased to have you with us, Dr. Professor Matsagar, and over to you now for your intervention and your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruba, for that nice introduction. Good evening to everybody. Thank you, Professor Ghosh, for inviting me to talk a little bit about the efforts that IIT Delhi is making on the medical oxygen. Is my slide visible here?
Yes, Dr. Patsara. Yeah, it is visible.
So today I will be talking more focused on the industry-specific standards for making medical oxygen and what role IIT Delhi is playing. And this talk is aligned in this 3-day training program on role of industries in COVID-19 mitigation and management. A few weeks ago, I have delivered a similar talk again on the same platform. However, there the focus had been what kind of national mission that we have taken on medical oxygen. So I will quickly highlight some of those points. However, then I will spend more time on the industry-specific standards and how the medical oxygen is made, and how IIT Delhi is playing its role in that. My presentation will be broadly divided into these heads, where I will start with the National Oxygen Mission that has been taken under the leadership of the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to Government of India, and what role IIT Delhi is playing within that. Then what are the actions we have taken and how we are bringing in on board some of the startups and the MSMEs in order to cater the need of medical oxygen in India. I will then focus a little bit more on the industry-specific standards for making medical oxygen. I will quickly talk about what are the different standards available to follow for the medical oxygen and the medical oxygen plant. And then I'll quickly touch upon the supply chain management related issues, and where all my colleagues here as well as the audience here should be able to contribute. Little bit of a background about this national mission on oxygen. It is led by Professor Vijay Raghavan, who is the Principal Scientific Advisor to Government of India, and he has taken up this under the Innovation and Science at Bharat. So essentially, he is bringing on one platform different stakeholders such as the industry, where of course PK is the organizer here, academic institutes like IITs, NITs, or ICERs, and then within those there are some incubation centers or research parks, and then the startups or the MSMEs. and he is bringing them together with his team, having Dr. Sapna Poti, Aditi Lele, Bhanuvasar, Vivor Bansal, who are helping these consortium members to put together all the efforts in order to bring these industry partners, the academic institutes, incubators, and the startup and MSMEs into this very important and crucial times where we are putting all our efforts together for supply of the medical oxygen. In this process, we have brought together on one single platform the right industries who are helping us in setting up the oxygen plants at different levels. And I will quickly show you what do I mean by different levels. There are different academic institutes who are giving us the technology, including, of course, IIT Delhi. And at the end of the day, it has to be manufactured and supplied to the hospitals. So again, some of the startups and the MSMEs have came forward. There are some administrative roles which are being played from IIT Delhi in order to ensure that there is a smooth transition, and I will show you the flow of knowledge as well as how these things are administered in a project and mission mode manner. This national project on oxygen, it is necessary for the meeting the demands in the hospitals. Very quickly, there are typically three categories of the medical oxygen, which I will again talk about in terms of their purity levels and the required liters per minute flow. However, because we never anticipated pandemic, and because of that kind of production that our companies have, it is lesser, and therefore we need to scale them up. Their production has to be scaled up. Their capacity has to be scaled up. While we are doing that, there are some challenges. The raw material availability is one of the bigger challenge. Again, I will talk about that in a little while. Then the logistic issue, where there is a demand and where there is a supply, and we have to meet these demand supply needs. And then ensure that this medical oxygen is available in all those COVID hospitals which have been either converted from the existing hospital or some makeshift hospitals have been made. In this process, this consortium that is formed at the PSA office, we are helping in not only bringing together all the stakeholders on one platform, but also we are helping them to make available the zeolite. I will quickly explain what zeolite is and why it is required. Setting up the small oxygen plants, giving all the technical support and guidance. And there are some bottlenecks that are being experienced because of the high demand, and one of them is the unavailability of the right size and capacity of the compressors. So again, this consortium is helping these MSMEs and startups in order to have the compressors available by tying up with some industries. Again, FICCI is one of the partners in helping us doing that. Apart from that, there is also an acute shortage of the quality oxygen cylinders and concentrators, which again, this consortium is helping to make them available as much as possible. So when I say consortium, these are the 7 consortium partners from IIT Delhi. It is Foundation for Innovation and Technology Transfer. And apart from FITT at IIT Delhi, there are other partners from IIT Kanpur, from the CCAM Bangalore, Venture Center Pune, IIT Bombay, IIT Hyderabad, and ISAR Bhopal. In particular, the role of IIT Delhi in this is multifold. We are first of all fostering the innovation. So when I say fostering the innovation means there are different technologies available for generating oxygen, either through the chemical route or the very commonly talked about the PSA based technology. And there are a number of ways that oxygen can be either generated or extracted from the air. These technologies are developed at IIT Delhi, and they are available for commercial use. Now, when these technology are taken to the production level, that means for commercial use, there has to be some necessities met with, and that is the technology transfer. That technology transfer is facilitated through the Foundation for Innovation and Technology Transfer, where we are bringing together the academic partners, that is these professors and research scholars who have developed these technologies, and we are bringing the industry partners together. They do typically start some small companies here within the academic environment, and then the role of FITT IIT Delhi is to incubate these small companies or those which are already established. However, they would like to contribute towards this national project on oxygen, towards development of oxygen. So again, we are also taking those on board, and we are liaising with them, providing them the necessary technology and help from academic side, whatever technology that they require. Of course, in this process, there are certain intellectual property right issues that needs to be taken care. So we have on board some lawyers who are specialized in the patent and copyright. So they take care of this from both sides, academia as well as industry. And then there are CSR industries who are extending the funding, and that funding has to be routed through proper channel. We are receiving funding from not only within India, but also from abroad. And there are certain rules that are required to be followed. So again, IIT Delhi is administrating these projects by signing different MOUs, so that eventually we are able to set up number of oxygen plants at different levels. When I say number of oxygen plants at different level, what I mean is it is not only the metropolitan cities such as Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, but we also mean, and we are also targeting the tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities as well, because the inflow towards the cities should be stopped, especially for those who are requiring medical oxygen. It is predicted that there might be a possibility that the third wave may appear, and the third wave might be more vulnerable for the citizens staying not only in tier 1 cities, but also tier 2 and tier 2 cities. Therefore, we are gearing up ourselves already with equipping those hospitals which are in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. There are different types of oxygen, medical oxygen gas supply units. The tier 2 and tier 3 cities are being equipped with the plant which you are seeing here on the slide. So it is a kind of a small scale plant. Of course, the capacity will define as to whether it is a small scale, medium scale, or large scale plant. So typically it is defined in terms of the liters per minute, what is the capacity of that oxygen plant. It could be extremely small. It could be as small as even which is useful for a single patient. So that is called bedside oxygen concentrator. So it is much different than the hospital plants. In the hospitals, typically we have, let's say, about 20 patients, or we have 100 patients, or even we have more than 100 patients in a hospital who are requiring medical oxygen. So for them, there is a centralized plant, and that supplies the medical oxygen at different rate depending on what is the need by that patient. Again, I will come to that in a little while. So there are three categories of the oxygen plants where we supply it for the ICU units, HDU unit, high dependency unit, and then their normal wards. In ICU unit, intensive care unit, obviously you require more oxygen. Roughly about 20 LPM is required per patient in the ICU unit, whereas if a patient is admitted in HDU, which is the high dependency unit, there typically the oxygen required is about 10 to 12 liters per minute, 10 to 12 LPM. Whereas a patient who is rather normal, still requiring the medical oxygen, but not too serious, so that patient would require somewhere in the range of 4 to 5 liters per minute. So the same oxygen plant, it supplies at different rates in different wards or different units in the hospital. Similar to what we have in our household, we have air purifier, some of similar size. There are bedside oxygen concentrators. These concentrators are relatively popular these days because most of the people, they feel that staying at home is of course safer, no doubt about it. But even if there is somebody who has been infected of the COVID and would like to get treatment staying at home, can buy this kind of bedside oxygen concentrator, which will help one single patient at a time, and it has a capacity of 10 LPM for one patient, and this is quite affordable. So one of the objectives given to this National Consortium of Oxygen is how we can bring down the cost of this bedside oxygen concentrators. Just to give some ballpark figures, earlier these kind of concentrators were costing about 50,000 or so, plus minus. However, now through our technological intervention from IIT Delhi, we have been able to bring it down to even 15 lakhs or even lesser. So it is a substantial reduction that we have been able to achieve in the prices of the bedside oxygen concentrators. There are other technologies which are being developed. Again, apart from IIT Delhi, it is IIT Madras who is also taking lead in this, and that is do it by your own kind of oxygen generators. So even at household level, one can generate oxygen by having some equipment put in place. Though today's focus of my lecture is not on that, however, that technology is available in public domain. So the bottom line here is that whatever technology that we are talking about, either at the hospital level or at the individual level or in the households, this is not something which is very challenging or a patented technology. It is a routine technology that is available in public domain, only that we have to study it and adopt it for our use. So for that purpose, we have given a nationwide call where we had made an appeal to micro, small, and medium enterprises to submit their proposals. And we have given 1 week's turnaround time. When we call the applications, immediately we have shortlisted them based on the initial screening. And then about 40 proposals were evaluated by some industry experts, and those industry experts recommended these 40 proposals. And then the MOU has been signed between these industries and IIT Delhi including. And then finally the CSR funds have been disbursed. So within a turnaround period of about 1 week, we have been able to rope in these 40 proposals. So when I say 40 proposals, of course, they are different MSMEs and startup companies, and their production capacity is ranging anywhere between 100 plants per 100 plants per day to even 1,000 plants per day. There are some large players in this. So if all of them are activated and they run with their full capacity, we are confident that in India we will be having no shortage of medical oxygen. However, that is still a wish list. The reason being that they cannot run with their full capacity because of the unavailability of the raw material. So that is one of the bottlenecks, and therefore we have again shifted our attention towards making available those raw materials. These MSMEs typically their products, means the medical oxygen that they are extracting is from the PSA technology, pressure swing absorption technology. I will quickly talk about it. So typically in the PSA plant, from the ambient air, the air is sucked, and from that air, typically we know that the nitrogen is in the large quantity, and then after nitrogen it is oxygen, and after oxygen, argon and other gases. So argon and other gases are hardly 1%. So if we remove the nitrogen and argon, what is left is the concentrated oxygen in the air. And that oxygen is supplied to the patient, either directly through the oxygen plant to the patient, or through by filling the cylinders in order to transport them from one place to the other, and then giving it through the face mask. Now, in this process, as you would observe, that main technology that is involved is here, where nitrogen and argon and other gases are removed from the air so that only oxygen passes through. So that is the chemical process, and that chemical process is based on what is called absorbing that those gases such as nitrogen, argon, etc. on a molecular sieve, and that molecular sieve is made out of the zeolite. So in the beginning of this presentation, I talked about a raw material unavailable right now, which is zeolite. So that zeolite has a tendency to absorb nitrogen on its surface. So if we remove the nitrogen, what is left with is a almost pure oxygen. Again, I will talk about that purity on some scale. So we have received large number of proposals and expression of interest by different MSMEs and startups who have proposed PSA-based technology. Some of you might have heard in the news and read in the newspaper that there is another technology which is based on cryogenic. That technology is available and that also provides medical oxygen. However, it requires a larger site plant. It requires more time for establishing, and the capital investment required for those plants which are based on cryogenic is also quite high. There have been some proposals which we have received. However, we have given them a different route. It is for a long-term future that we would like to take them up. You might also have heard in the news that India has imported some oxygen cylinders from Germany, from Saudi Arabia, from Korea, and some from Japan. These oxygen cylinders typically are very large size. They are typically produced out of the cryogenic process and not through the PSA process. However, my focus today is only on the PSA base because that is very easily achievable by our small scale industries. The way we are executing this at the National Oxygen Mission in India is like this. So after those proposals have been shortlisted, we sign an MOU with them. And then we have these incubators, IIT Delhi is included. There are 7 incubators. Those 7 incubators, they give the technology to these MSME if they don't have. And if they already have some plan for medical oxygen production, then we provide them support to enhance that capability so that we can meet the demand. Now, once those industries, they manufacture medical oxygen, it has to be taken to the hospitals. So we are taking on board some transport agencies such as Amazon or Gati. And again, IIT Delhi is taking a lead to do the mapping between the production plants and the hospitals. So we have developed a platform for the logistics of availability of oxygen at the source and where it has to be supplied, where there is a high demand of medical oxygen. This is facilitated again through this National Oxygen Consortium, where we have different players, including, of course, the MSMEs who are producing the medical oxygen, the transport companies, and of course, hospital also be taken on board so that we understand their needs and we supply or we meet their needs. Now, very quickly, I would focus on the industry-specific standards for medical oxygen. As I said earlier, this is hardly a challenging task as to what technology we typically use for medical oxygen generation. So here I have taken a liberty to take one simple process from ISC Bangalore, where they have publicized this technology so that anybody can use it for medical oxygen generation. What you see here is the actual plant. Again, this is somewhat similar to what I have mentioned about the zeolite, which absorbs the nitrogen and argon from the air and then supplies the medical oxygen at a particular pressure and having some humidification. So typically we have ambient air sucked in this plant, and then the impurities are removed. Then it is dehumidified, and then that dry oxygen is supplied, is stored in the surge tank, and from the surge tank it is sent to the use. Now here, what is important is what is the purity of that oxygen. So as per the medical standards, the purity of the medical oxygen required is about 93%. It could be plus minus 3%, not more. So it means the purity of the medical oxygen should range between 90% to 96%, somewhere in that range. If there are some technological challenges to maintain this purity of above 90%, because after running for some time, the plant, particularly the molecular sieve made out of zeolite material, it may absorb some impurities, and because of that, it may not be able to completely absorb the nitrogen, and because of that, the efficiency may go down. It means the purity of oxygen may go down. And please note, we are of course playing with almost life of the patients. So that becomes a critical challenge in order to meet the continued efficiency of the purity of oxygen. So again, some of our professors at IIT Delhi, they have designed these chemical adsorption technologies such that there are number of layers, and those number of layers come in play, and they remove the impurities first, so that zeolite is not required to change at least once in a year. At least in 1 year, you do not have to change the zeolite as such, because again, zeolite is the one which we are currently dependent on to use this technology. Apart from that, of course, these hospitals will require to have this oxygen supply units in the hospital premise, and thereby, in order to ensure the comfort level of the patients, the noise level of these oxygen generators should be lower. So typically, as per the standards, it should be the noise level should be lesser than 65 dBs as specified by the MOH and FW, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Apart from that, there are certain other specifications, but I would focus again on the medical oxygen and its impurities as specified in some of these documents. So as per the standards, there are two categories. One is the main oxygen and other is the other equipment. First of all, regarding oxygen, we have two categories. One is the Indian standard given by the National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories, NABL. And many of these documents are already available on the NABL website. And international standards, again, India is partner in that, Bureau of Indian Standards, which is the ISO, International Standards Organization. And out of there, there are these two standards which are applicable for medical oxygen. One is ISO 183/2006. However, now it is obsolete. It has been replaced by ISO 7396 Part 1 2016. So the earlier one, the 183, it was specifically on oxygen concentrator supply systems for use with medical gas pipeline systems. However, now they have broadened its scope, and now it is for the medical gas pipeline systems, and within that they have pipeline systems for compressed medical gases and vacuums. So typically the pressure that we talk about here is in the range of 4 to 5 bar pressure. For those who doesn't understand this unit of bar, 1 bar is kind of equivalent to one means atmospheric pressure. So you can imagine 4 to 5 bar means you are going above the atmospheric pressure, that is 4 to 5 bars. Typically, this range of pressure is required, 4 to 5 bar pressure is required for the hospital plants, and these are almost no pressure. So you produce the oxygen or you extract the oxygen and send it directly to the patient without pressurizing it any further. Whereas there are instances when we have to produce the oxygen at plant and then transport it from the production plant to the hospital. So for transporting, we require cylinders, and typically in the cylinders we have liquid oxygen. We have high pressure, and that pressure is up to about 150 bars or sometimes even more than that. Now, when we have higher pressure and it is oxygen, then safety related issues start coming in. And apart from that, it is pure oxygen, so it is hazardous, and therefore all the hazard related issues for handling the high pressure gas containers, they are required to be followed, such as for that for the mechanical equipment systems and electrical systems. I have just taken one example out of this, the IEC 6061, and it is for the medical electrical equipment, part 1 to 8, general requirements for safety collateral standards, general requirement in states and guidance for alarm systems in medical electrical equipment and medical electrical system. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting this is there are large number of individual documents available with the ISO as well as in the NABL, which needs to be followed for each component. Now, which component are we talking about here? If let us say I talk about the oxygen concentrators. So I have quickly shown here some of the components that are required in these kind of plants. So obviously, we are talking about the handling of the oxygen, and for that I have talked about some of these requirements. So requirements are of course from the medical side, from the mechanical side, and from the electrical side. If I talk about from the medical side, we, as I have mentioned, require the purity of the medical oxygen ranging from 90 to 96%. But apart from that, because it is used for the curing the patients, the carbon monoxide level and carbon dioxide levels have to be maintained below 5 ppm and 300 ppm respectively, whereas it should not have any other gases, particularly sulfur and nitrous gases. So their ppm should be less than 0. It means there should be no impurities in the medical oxygen. This is a specific requirement that needs to be followed for the medical oxygen generation. There, I have mentioned that the nitrogen is absorbed here, so that this is the nitrogen expulsion unit. And in that nitrogen expulsion unit, typically we use the adsorbent material, which is the zeolite. Zeolites, there are different types of zeolites, but in the PSA plants, pressure swing adsorption technology plants, we use two types of zeolites. And these two types of zeolites are lithium zeolite and sodium zeolite. Again, out of these two, lithium zeolite is more popularly used in oxygen plants. Now, depending on what kind of lithium zeolite is available, in what size and in what quantity, the yield of a medical oxygen plant depends. Unfortunately, this lithium zeolite is currently falling short in India. Earlier, it used to be imported from China, but this consortium has made a conscious decision that we will not remain dependent on China for any raw material supplies. So we are making our efforts to make the lithium zeolite available indigenously. We are supporting some industries who are in the process of setting up plant for lithium zeolite, and in a few weeks' time, we will have the lithium zeolite available. That lithium zeolite will be used here for nitrogen expulsion. Apart from that, there are some compressors and whatever standards required for meeting the clauses of compressor, that those needs to be followed. There are some solenoid valves required. Again, the standards related to solenoid valves need to be followed. There are some electrical equipment, obviously, and thereby the electrical system standards needs to be followed. So I have talked about three categories of this standard specification: the medical category, mechanical, and the electrical, which needs to be followed. And taken one example out of this, which is ISO 8573 for the compressed air. And typically here we are talking about the pressures ranging somewhere right from as low as 4 to 5 bars up to about 150 bars in the oxygen cylinder. So this summarizes what are the safety requirements from the medical side as well as from the mechanical and electrical side. IIT Delhi is also playing its role in managing the logistic in this. We are using some state-of-the-art simulation technology in order to meet these requirements. So there is a point where there is a supply available, there is a demand available, there is a demand from the hospital. So from the availability of this medical oxygen, we are able to inform the particular transporter to take it from the oxygen supply to the hospital. So that optimal delivery time, that means delivering that oxygen in an optimal time, is being ensured through the algorithm that is developed by IIT Delhi. Though this particular aspect I had talked in my previous presentation here, so I'm not focusing it today. So I will summarize by making an appeal to the audience and to those who are in a position to contribute. There are different kinds of contributions that this consortium is looking forward for. Of course, one is to set up the oxygen generation and supply plants in the hospital, as well as to have some plants wherein the oxygen cylinders could be refilled. Apart from that, we also require some industries to come forward for indigenous production of the molecular sieves made out of zeolite required for the pressure swing absorption technology for medical oxygen. In addition to that, the oxygen cylinder availability itself is a challenge, and we would appeal those manufacturers who can make the high pressure gas cylinders. They can manufacture these oxygen cylinders and provide. You might have heard in the news that in IIT Delhi, whatever different kinds of cylinders we have, we emptied them and we repurpose them to store oxygen just because the oxygen cylinder themselves are not adequate enough. Apart from that, even the compressors are now falling short because we require large number of concentrators, and therefore those companies who are involved in manufacturing of the compressors, there is an appeal that they can come forward and supply these kind of compressors. Supply chain logistics, obviously, we are taking care of that. And all this requires funds. And then there is an appeal for the CSR organizations to donate the CSR money so that we can meet this medical oxygen need at the national level. So with this, I conclude my presentation. If there are any queries, either I could be contacted or you can directly write to the PSA office. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Vasant Matsagar. Saab, you really highlighted some very key issues, and I think in this entire process where we as a country are fighting this COVID crisis, there were reflections in your presentation which very clearly said that there are business opportunities coming out of this. And see, any disaster for that matter, and this is what we are trying to advocate very strongly for as a disaster risk management vertical within FICCI, which is very unique in itself because no other chamber has such a vertical. No other industry association has a dedicated DRM vertical. They do conduct or undertake activities, but not as, and we take pride in this because one of the fundamental areas which we propagate is that there are business opportunities in disaster risk reduction. And I think COVID, your very one slide where you were calling out to the industries and to other stakeholders to come forward and support and contribute is nothing but a statement of opportunities coming for from the sort of the task force which is handling oxygen. I think it's been served on a platter for a lot of industry, small and medium business owners who are right now linked and attending our conference and this online e-conference. And in fact, that's why we say all of these people who are attending, these participants, are not just mere attendees, they are ambassadors. They need to take this information out amongst their peers, to their colleagues, to their friends who have related businesses. I think that is the idea. So these are all ambassadors who will take out this message. What Himanshu Shekharji mentioned, what Dr. Kamath and what Dr. Matsagar, you yourself, I think there are such important takeaways for the industries and all stakeholders in the community. And this is some this would not come out in a news article, this will not come out in a news channel, or it will or over an email. This is something which is being brought to them directly through you. Thank you so much, and many congratulations for the great work you yourself are doing along with the entire IIT Delhi and PSA's office. This, I'm sure, in future, third wave, fourth wave, or no wave, we would be better prepared when it comes to oxygen supplies, and be rest assured as a community that we are in safe hands. And we're doing all we can. We are doing all we can, and we have gone all out now. Looking at the presentation, the details with which you presented, I think they were very, very useful details coming out very strongly in your presentation. Thank you so much, Matsagar Saab. We'll be in touch. I'm sure CDRI, Mona Chavda and DG Sandeep Poundrik Saab, they discussed with me briefly. And the first name which came to my mind was yours. I said, I know they must be linked, but they're just he's the right guy. Just talk to him. He'll give you any information across on this subject, which is latest in the country on the on the subject of oxygen and oxygen related issues. Thank you so much, Matsagar Saab. But thank you again. We have so many comments coming in for Matsagar Saab. That's an excellent presentation, super presentation from Joy Chandran, Priya Bhatt, Ashish Gupta, of course, Ramachandran Kamath Saab has also commented on a few, Arshad Kumar, Girdhari Lal Saini, Dr. Kishore Kumar Vedanta, all of them just loving what's been presented on this platform. I would take this opportunity now to wholeheartedly welcome our next presenter. And of course, sorry to keep you waiting, Shri Gaurav, Professor Gaurav Krishna Bansal, IRTS National Academy of Indian Railways, Vadodara, Government of India, who would be talking on role and contribution of Indian Railways in COVID-19 pandemic. Professor Saab, yesterday, when we were, even on the first day and yesterday was the second day, today is the final day. So your presentation, we were just trying to give a teaser of what people should expect, about 300 and plus audience here. And there was one clear consensus, and we said we are very excited about your presentation because, we throughout this last 1 year, especially, when we as disaster management professionals have always known the important role that Indian Railways plays in the entire supply chain management, and the entire supply chain management is one bit of it. The entire response of a nation, especially in a country like ours. And in the last 1.5 to 2 months, when the oxygen crisis was at its peak in our country, I think the biggest comfort which came out in the news, in social media, through the railway minister, through other ministers and officials, was the way railway came into action to connect the last dots which were missing, with clusters of oxygen plants in Eastern India, in Konkan, Western India, how railways helped connect, with those plants with Northern India. They've always been doing it, but in a crisis situation. I also remember when I was in NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, in 2005 to 2008, we had a presentation of Railway Board on their preparedness of disaster, and it was we were spellbound. I was amazed personally, because the sort of, even in that time when NDMA was under formation or what had just formed, I think railways, it seemed, was always prepared for a disaster or a crisis for longest time. I think I would say it goes back hundreds of years. I mean, maybe 6, 7, 8 decades. You had a dedicated system which will deal with crises, not only for accidents, but any sort of crisis. And we are really pleased to have you with us. We are really pleased to welcome you. And I would, before I hand over to you for your presentation on this very important subject, it would be my pleasure to also request my colleague, Mainak Majumdar, from the Disaster Management, Risk Management team at FICCI, to formally introduce you briefly and hand over to you for your intervention. Over to you, Mainak.
Thank you, Rubab. And let me now introduce Professor Gaurav Krishna Bansal. He's IRTS, National Academy of Indian Railways, Vadodara, Government of India. He has had earlier many posts. To name a few is CPRO from NCR in the headquarters of Indian Railways. He was also Director, North Central Zone Cultural Center in the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. He has also held many positions like Director of Allahabad National Museum from Ministry of Culture, Government of India. And he was also Professor, Administration and Disaster Management in IRITM, Lucknow. He has an extensive career over all the sectors on disaster management. Over to you, sir, for your presentation.
I would say that it's still afternoon. So good afternoon, Mr. Sood. Good afternoon, Mr. Majumdar. Good afternoon, Mr. Ghosh. A very warm welcome and a very salutations from Indian Railways to all of you. I feel very privileged and very honored to be a part of this amazing symposium where we are discussing the latest crisis being faced by this world in general and India in particular. And I also feel thankful that you have considered us railways as an important part of the industry, because being a department of the government of India, often we are thought of as just a department and not really a part of the industry. I would like to thank the Railway Board, especially Executive Director Information and Publicity, Shri R.D. Bajpai, for considering me worthy enough to present the contribution and the role that the Railways has played in the overall management of the COVID pandemic. Now, I know that it's the last talk, and the people would be fagged out after 2 days so we often say that the first person who speaks and the last person who speaks are the sacrificial people, you know. So, I'll try to make it as brief and as interesting as possible. Without much ado, let us move on. So just as a hook, line, and sinker. So just like for starters, okay. I will not dwell too much into the history. I have been into culture. I have been into museums. So I'm quite inclined towards history and about memorabilia. But suffice it to say that the railway age dawned with the Stockton and Darlington Railway in England on September 27, 1825, and this is the watercolor of the opening of the Stockton and Darlington Railway by John Dobbin in 1880s. And the crowds are watching. The train crossed the Skern Bridge in Darlington. So it was way back in 1825 that it started. And in India, 28 years after Stockton and Darlington, India was the first country actually outside Europe. Few people would be knowing that outside Europe, we were the first country to witness the railway age. And the first train in India ran on April 16, 1853 at 3:35 p.m. The distance was 21 kilometers. Time taken was 45 minutes. The company was Great Indian Peninsula Railway Company. 14 carriages were there, 400 guests, and 3 locomotives called Sultan Sahib and Sindh. And this is an actual photograph from our archives showing that actual train that moved. So this is as far back as we go, so far as the railway is concerned. And as you can see, it was a humble beginning, 21 kilometers. But as on March 2019, see how things have changed. It's the largest railway network in the world in terms of passenger kilometers. It's the 4th largest in terms of size. And as on March 2019, we have a route length of 67,415 kilometers, more than 23 million passengers per day. So that would be in Australia per day. Around 13,500 passenger carrying trains on both long distance and suburban routes. 7,321 stations across the length and breadth of India, 9,146 freight trains per day, about 2,89,185 wagons, 12,147 locomotives, 74,000 plus coaches, world's 8th largest employer with 1.227 million employees. So now that is almost equivalent to the population of Bhutan. And we are organized into 17 railway zones, 8 production units, 41 workshops, numerous loco sheds and coaching depots. And we have a research, design, and standards organization, 21 railway recruitment boards, 16 railway recruitment cells, railway claims tribunals, 106 railway hospitals, and several health units, and 114 schools. So while I have presented this data in front of you to underscore the fact that we are not merely a transporter. You know, a railway is seen as a transporter. I mean, one fact which I have omitted in this is that we are also the largest employers of the sports people in the country, and also perhaps the largest supporters of the cultural people in the country. So while railway is seen merely as a transporter in the public eye, we are not merely a transporter, we are a contributor to the country in every field. It may be medicine, it may be education, it may be culture, it may be sports, and of course, logistics is our business. So now coming to the current crisis, and since in fact I have been, and Mr. Sood very rightly mentioned that the Indian Railways has a very robust system and a very ready system. You know, I have been into safety, operational safety for a large part of my life. And one way that we respond is that I used to have a suitcase, and that suitcase was constantly packed with a separate set of toiletries, with a separate set of clothes, and it was no voice. Are you getting me, Mr. Sood? Somebody has commented no.
Yes,
No,
yes,
I
sir.
think we got a message from someone. There could be some connection issue at their end, but now yeah, they're
okay.
back. They're back. They're back.
So I used to keep a suitcase next to my bed, okay, with a separate set of clothes, separate set of toiletries and everything, because in the event of an accident, we got precisely 20 minutes to get up from our bed, rush to the station, get into the accident relief train. If you missed the accident relief train, it was your problem. It was not the problem of the railways, because it had to leave in 20 minutes. So that is the kind of response that we used to. In fact, I have taught incident command system, and I was very surprised to find that when I was teaching incident command system and when I was learning that system, okay, I was very surprised to find that the incident command system is uncannily, it seems to be organized in the way railway is organized. So not surprisingly that we have a robust system of disaster and emergency relief, because some of the most advanced systems which the world thought later have been used in railways for hundreds of years, you know, for at least more than 100 years. So coming back to people's expectations in times of crisis, what do people expect from the railways? Number one, they expect cheap, safe, and efficient transportation. That's number one. Okay, and of whom? Of the affected passengers. Okay, of goods, parcels, and to keep the economy running, and of relief material. Now, all three are equally important. I mean, we cannot downplay the importance of any one of these three. Affected passengers, I mean, of course, this is the COVID time, so the number was very large. But even in case of an accident, even if when railway transportation is not available, we use the road transportation or any other means of transportation. We have even used helicopters at times to evacuate the passengers, because their number one priority, human life, is most important. But then the economy has to run. And we have to take things from one place to the other and as fast as possible. And because we are a bulk carrier, 91% of our total carriage is bulk. So the kind of capacities that we have, they have to be utilized in the service of the nation. And of course, of relief material. And we have seen it in cases of cyclones, in case of tsunamis, that railways were the first to respond and reach the material. Other such non-transport interventions that may be required, that is medical support and financial support. Now, this is something which is often overlooked. Okay. This is something which is often overlooked, the medical support and the financial support. I mean, for instance, I can give you the example of Pratapnagar Hospital here in Vadodara. Okay, now it is one of the major centers of vaccination for COVID. And my wife, she got vaccinated 2 days back, and we went to another center. Now, I'm not comparing that somebody is efficient or somebody is inefficient. But all I can say is that I got vaccinated at some other center than our railway hospital, and my wife got vaccinated at the railway hospital, and we could see the difference. We could see the difference in the management. So the management is very smooth. It is very, I would say, patient friendly, and people are going and getting vaccinated. So there's something which is overlooked. And financial support. We will come to the financial support part. Okay. So the first wave of COVID, the lockdown period. Okay, so we have to divide COVID into the two periods. The first period was the lockdown period, where the demand from the railways was different, the response from the railways was different, and the second period was the current wave, the second wave, where we have just talked at length about oxygen, so that was different. So the first wave of COVID in the lockdown, to facilitate and help stranded laborers and other persons, from 1st May 2020 to 31st August 2020, Indian Railways ran 4,621 Shramik special trains. Now, this is no mean figure. 4,621 Shramik special trains. Okay, from May to August. So May, June, July, August, something like 4 months. We are running more than 4,000 trains. 63.1 lakh passengers were transported safely to their homes. And we did not collect any fare directly from the passengers. There has been some propaganda about railway selling tickets and all that stuff. But that propaganda is wrong. We were compensated. We were compensated by the state governments. Yes, we were compensated. the burden of buying those tickets or the burden of getting that authority to travel was not transferred to the COVID affected people or the people who were migrating or going back to their homes because of COVID. So whatever propaganda has happened is wrong. Okay, we made special arrangements for enhanced sanitization. I have personally gone and seen, the coaches which were sanitized and the way they were sanitized. So जिसको कहते हैं ना हिंदी में प्रत्यक्षदर्शी, तो हाथ कंगन को आरसी क्या, पढ़े लिखे को फारसी क्या. So I have seen it personally. Then the special security arrangements were made because there was always a chance with such huge crowds coming to our stations. There's always a chance of a stampede, and you will appreciate that not a single stampede has happened in the transportation of our passengers. Not a single stampede anywhere in the country. Okay, medical arrangements were made for those who were elderly or who were affected. Free meals were given and free water was given. All in all, Indian Railways served 1.96 crore meals. No, that is a figure. 1.96 crore meals and over 2.19 crore packaged water bottles to the passengers during this period. So I mean, this is the kind of human service that the railway has been doing. This was during the first wave, because in the first wave the lockdown was there. The number of patients was not so high, but the number of migrants was very high. Then we also took this opportunity because we stopped running the passenger trains for most of the period. So we took this opportunity to form and run parcel special trains. Okay. And because what happened, and Sood Saab, आपने भी इसको experience किया होगा, हमने experience किया है, that we stopped going to the market and we started ordering online and stuff was coming home, so parcels were required to be transported. So we stepped in to help until 4th June 2021. Okay, a few days back, we have run 9,694 parcel special trains. Out of these, 9,359 have been timetable trains. Now, just think about it. Just think about it. When you order on some website like Amazon or Flipkart, okay, you do not have a timetable. You have an approximate idea when the stuff is going to be delivered. We are giving you a timetable that, okay, fine, my stuff is going to reach today and is going to reach you tomorrow. So this is because urgency is another factor which is very important in transportation of relief material. And carrying 11.3 lakh tons of essential supplies to people to their homes all over country. So this was a big role played because if we did not play this role, the lockdown would not have been successful. People would be forced to come out of their homes, and the first wave could have been a very, very bad situation. The second wave, it broke in India with an unprecedented ferocity in March 2021. And it saw much more hospitalizations. Whatever is this virus, whether it is natural or synthetic, that is, of course, a matter of debate. But the fact remains that the second wave was very, very dangerous. Lung involvement was more and severe. RT-PCR was coming negative, but the CAT scan was coming positive. Oxygen support was badly needed in the hospital, and what was available was just not adequate. So how did we respond? We decided to run oxygen specials to deliver liquefied medical oxygen to various states across the country. So we have just had a presentation on the generation of the raw material, which is the oxygen. But the oxygen, if it remains in the tank, it's no use. It has to reach the end user. So as on June 11, 2021, Indian Railways oxygen expresses have delivered 2,79,000. Sorry, 27,981 million tons of liquefied. We still do that. I mean, that is it. So 27,981 metric tons of liquefied medical oxygen we have delivered in 1,624 tankers. So pretty much any tanker that was available in the country we have used, and carried by 396 oxygen express trains till now. Total of 15 states, they got relief by oxygen express trains covering 39 cities. Now I could name these cities. They are here. For paucity of time, but maybe I could. I mean, there are Lucknow, Varanasi, Kanpur, Bareilly, Gorakhpur, Agra, Sagar, Jabalpur, Katni, Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, Nagpur, Nashik, Pune, Mumbai, Sholapur, Hyderabad, Telangana, Faridabad, Gurugram, Tughlakabad, Okla, Kanpura, Rajasthan, and you name it. I mean, 39 is too long to go on, but suffice it to say that wherever there has been a crisis, we have been able to reach, and that is our contribution. Now, the logistical challenges that were overcome in running of the oxygen express train. Now, it appears very simple. You load a train, you run a train. Okay, So it appears very simple. There's a track, there's a loco, there's a wagon, and you just do it. But it's not so simple. Number one is mapping of the different routes with oxygen supply locations. Because as you have rightly pointed out, that the oxygen supply locations are not spread evenly around the country. They are spread in certain places, they are concentrated. So we had to do that mapping, and that mapping had to be done in real time. And a complete team of officers at the level of the railway board and at the level of zonal railways was monitoring this mapping, keeping abreast with emerging needs of these states, because now the needs are fluctuating. Okay. Now suppose I'm running a train for Telangana and suddenly I find that the number of patients is increasing somewhere in Maharashtra. So I may have to divert. So that real-time information system is very, very important to make such an endeavor a success. Identifying locations for picking up oxygen like Hapa, Baroda, Mundra, West, and Rourkela, you've already mentioned that we identified them. Then handling complex operational route planning scenarios. As an operation man, I can tell you that what appears to be very simple may not be so simple. So while it may appear that going from Lucknow to Varanasi via Sultanpur is very easy, but then something may be happening in that route and I may have to take an alternate route, or something may be affected by, say, cyclone Tokati. So all those things have to be taken into consideration while doing the route planning. Then average speed of 55 kmph of oxygen special over long distances. I mean, just to put it in a perspective, that are goods trains, they run at the average speed, all India average speed of something like 22 kilometers or 23 kilometers, but we manage the speed nearly double that. Okay. And managing, as a railway man, I can tell you that increasing the speed even by 1 kilometer per hour is a challenge, average speed. And doubling the speed, so you can well imagine the kind of urgency and the kind of dedication. And I can tell you, I've spent nights in the control personally, and my officers, my junior colleagues who are now working in the field, they have spent nights in controls. I have been in touch with them. I've talked to them. I've talked to them at 1 o'clock at night. I've received calls at 1 o'clock at night. Sir, ye ho raha hai, wo ho raha hai. So people have woken up nights, and people have woken up nights, night after night, to make this happen. Okay, इनकी तो हम बात ही नहीं कर रहे हैं. Or running trains on a high priority green corridors. So we created green corridors, set aside other things, made it a priority, because again, nothing is more important in life. Operational teams of zonal railways working round the clock to monitor and ensure fast and efficient moves. We have discussed, and technical stoppages reduced to 1 minute. Now, this is another very important thing. Mr. Sood, you would, and the rest of the listeners, you would appreciate that when we stop a train, okay, a train has to go, say, 1,500 kilometers. Now, one crew cannot work more than 10. One driver cannot work more than 10 hours. So we need to maybe have 2 changes of crew. Okay. Now, every time a train stops, okay, it takes time to stop. It takes time to accelerate, and it takes time to change the crew, because there's a process. There's a paper process also. And normally, if we are able to do it in 5 minutes, then we are considered to be super operation people. I mean, if I am able to do it in 5 minutes, I'll probably get an award. Okay. So it's that tough. And we did it in 1 minute. So we did it in 1 minute. It's almost like Elon Musk going to Mars. Okay. I mean, so whether he goes to Mars or not, I'm not aware. But this thing is very critical, because unless and until we do this, we are not able to achieve our targets. Then I mean, this was about the transportation, but we did capacity augmentation for treatment of our COVID patients. And from 1st October to 31st December 2020, 40 ventilators were added, oxygen pipelines were added in 10 health facilities, high flow nasal oxygen machines increased from 66 to 129, and oxygen supported beds increased from 2,539 to 4,681% increase in oxygen supported beds. Okay. And 5,601 coaches were converted into COVID care centers deployed as per demand of the state government. Now, several of them have been used, several of them have not been used. That's a different matter. Okay, but हम तो दस्तरखान पे खाना लेके आ गए थे. अब उसको कोई खाए ना खाए, वो एक अलग बात है. Okay, and then dedicated fever clinics started in all railway health facilities. More than 5.10 million cases have been screened. 50 लाख से ऊपर तो हम लोगों ने स्क्रीन किए हैं रेलवे में, और जिसमें से 48,373 have been tested positive. Now, just imagine if this 50 lakh screening was not there. Okay, and engagement of contractual, we have increased the engagement of our contractual workers and then intensive sensitization drives in all railway premises. I can tell you personally that if I take, say, 30 lectures in a month, and suppose in every lecture there are 30 people, okay, 900 people. Before every lecture, every faculty of NIR and perhaps of all the CTIs, they are spending at least 2 minutes telling the participants about the importance of putting a mask, about the importance of sanitization, and about the importance of social distancing. So हमारे यहाँ कहा जाता है, मैं लखनऊ से हूँ, कि चर्चा पर्चा खर्चा. तो चर्चा बड़ी जरूरी होती है कि जैसे हम रामलीला हर साल करते हैं, तो रामलीला तो सबको पता है कि क्या होती है, लेकिन अच्छी बात को बार बार रिपीट करने से उसका इम्पैक्ट बढ़ता है. तो वी बीन डूइंग दैट आल्सो. Then there is the question of COVID martyrs on Indian Railways. Now this is something which is not discussed. Okay, everybody discusses oxygen specials, everybody discusses parcel specials, everybody discusses Shramik specials, everybody discusses so many other things, but nobody talks about the people who have given up their lives in the fight against COVID. Till date, 592 employees of IR have lost their lives, which is attributable to the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. Now, it is not directly, it cannot be said that they were there in the hospital or something, but then they were. Thank you so much for that comment. So we have, our staff, and I know, being a railway officer and being a sportsman, I'm in touch with a lot of staff. I have known my staff. I know one person who was deadly afraid of COVID, and yet he went on duty, got COVID, his entire family got COVID, his mother barely survived. There have been cases where these are the documented cases of people who have died. But then there are cases where the family members of railway people have died, and they may not figure here. I go to my office, I take COVID home. Okay, recently one of our very senior officers, Pradeep Kumar Saab, who retired as member staff, he expired because of COVID. So I mean, this figure is important because it could be multiplied several times if we took into consideration the affected families. So in summary, I'm trying to make it as brief as possible, Sood Saab, because I know that I'm the last speaker. Okay, so in summary, the response and contribution of IR in battling the COVID pandemic has been on several fronts. One has been logistical, okay. Then there has been medical, there has been manpower, and there has been sensitization. And then there has been financial salary contribution by Indian Railway personnel for COVID relief effort. Another thing which is often overlooked. Another thing, I mean, I can tell you about my organization, the National Academy of Indian Railways, very small organization, less number of people, but more than 6 lakh rupees we have contributed. Okay, and if you look at everybody across Indian Railways, the figure will go into hundreds of crores actually. So not only have we contributed with logistics, we have contributed with medical, we have contributed with manpower, we have contributed with martyrs, we have contributed with sensitization, and also our financial resources out of our salaries. So that's what we have done as railways. So the last word is, I am from Lucknow, so I could not end without a shade. Okay. चमन में एक तलाते रंगो से बात बनती है. चमन में एक तलाते रंगो से बात बनती है. तुम ही तुम हो तो क्या तुम हो, हम ही हम हैं तो क्या हम हैं. So ladies and gentlemen, it is a collaborative effort. Nobody is complete. Nobody has all the resources. Nobody can claim to have responded 100%, or nobody can claim to have done everything for the COVID. But it reminds me of that little thing from that little anecdote with which I will end. That there was a fire, and a little sparrow was in the forest, and the little sparrow was taking some water in its beak and dropping it on the fire. And the crow said that I mean, will this little water help in the fire? So the sparrow said that I don't know whether it will help with the fire, but when history will be written, I will be written as the person who helped extinguish the fire, and you will be taken as the person who criticized. So criticism aside, whatever resources we have, they are at the disposal of the nation. They're at the disposal of the industry. They're at the disposal of the people, and we as railway people will gladly lose our sleep, will gladly lose our comfort, will also gladly contribute financially if it helps to save the lives of our countrymen. Dhanyavad. Thank you. Indian Railways, we care for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gaurav Krishna Bansal, ladies and gentlemen. I think there's no summing up required for that presentation. It was so full of passion, so full of energy. For a moment, I thought, we were talking not to a gentleman who represent Indian Railways, but someone who is Indian Railways himself. And I'm sure this feeling must be across all the million, the lakhs, the 1 point some million employees. And I have witnessed this personally. I have met them personally, a lot of them over the last 15, 16 years of my professional life and otherwise also. We are proud. I mean, we are indeed most proud of this network. We are proud whenever we go out. We do a lot of international travel. FICCI takes out a lot of business delegations abroad, and there are a lot of inbound business delegations also. When जब देश की धरोहर की बात होती है, जब देश की हेरिटेज की बात होती है, जब इंडिया की स्ट्रेंथ की बात होती है, so infrastructural strength की बात होती है, and no conversation is complete without the praise of Indian Railways. And in all aspects, जो आपने presentation में इतनी, it seemed very very simple, बहुत सरलता से सहजता से आपने बताया, लेकिन I think कभी भी आपने बीच में एक दो बारी बोला कि लास्ट स्पीकर है, हमें तो लग रहा था कि आज शायद शुरू हो रहा है ओटीपी आपकी बात से. You said that tone where we are getting messages from so many of our attendees, and I would personally, this is what we like to do. We have YouTube links of all the 3 days, and people who miss out, they reach out to us. Can you please share us the link? And I think this is the first time we've had you on our platform, Bansal Saab. And I think we've missed you all, on our earlier platform. That's all I can say. आपने जो information हमारे साथ share करी है, I think whatever you've shared, I know it is a million times more, which is there, which cannot be put or put on a piece of paper or a slide. But having said that, please, this is a message from a commoner of India. We are very proud of what Indian Railways has done in the past and continues to do. And you're really not a COVID warrior per se. I mean, that's a very small recognition for Indian Railways. You are the savior of this country in a lot of ways. So, many ways. Thank you so much, Professor Saab, for your kind introduction.
Thank you, Sood Saab, and I would always love to be a part of any such event that FICCI has. If we could contribute from the side of the railways, we are always there.
We are pleased, and we will note that down on a very serious note. And I see the smile on my colleague Manak's face also. You will hear a lot from him because एक बारी वो कहते हैं कि इसके जाल में जब आ जाए कोई तो वो conference होगी तो वो खुद ही phone आ जाएगा, मैंने कब, we have to make a present, because see, this is the community we are building, Professor Saab. This is what we are engaged in. We are not here to disseminate information or pass on a message. We are building a platform which is community, which is a community where best practices are shared, where knowledge, information is exchanged. It's not a one-way flow. It's exchanged, and I hate calling. Sometimes I would call it a slip of tongue that I call people who are attending as attendees. They're not attendees. They are our ambassadors. They will take this message out. Imagine these 300 plus people. इनमें से कुछ professors हैं, कुछ universities के. They use this as training material, and this is the idea. This is the beauty of our what reach we have been able to achieve. We are very glad that it's a perfect ending to this online training program. Let me be rest assured. Let me just share with you this very important. Anecdotally also you mentioned a few things which I think created such excitement and interest. We are short of words to express our gratitude. Thank you, Bansal Saab. So, JB Gupta, one of our ambassadors, he says it was very informative session in very short period of 3 days of the subject. A lot yet to be discovered and nicely organized by FICCI and NIDM. He thanks everyone for the opportunity to attend this. JB Gupta, there are a series of such messages, and of course, a lot of messages are going to Akhil Gupta as well directly. where they are demanding for presentations. Please take my request also, Akhil. Please share a copy of the presentations with me as well, and especially what Bansal Saab shared today.
I have already mailed the presentation to Mr. Gupta. He must be having it.
I have received it, Professor Bansal. I have received it. Thank you. Thank you.
So as a practice, what we do, Professor Saab, we compile all the presentations which are approved by the presenters themselves, and we share it with all the attendees along with the certificate of participation within 7 to 10 days of this OTP finishing. So that's a process which we follow. And ladies and gentlemen, that was Professor Gaurav Krishna Bansal, the pride of Indian Railways. He shared how well we are prepared, how well we are positioned when it comes to our railway network. They are always there, as we said at the end. They always care for us, and we felt that warmth and care on a daily basis as Indian citizens. We had Dr. Vasant Matsagar from IIT, who touched upon important issues around medical oxygen. I think that was phenomenal. Then, of course, we had Ramachandra Kamath Saab telling more about vaccine and public health in this COVID crisis. And Himanshu Shekhar today, earlier senior editor from NDTV, speaking about role of media. I think it could have been a better, I can't imagine a better setup, a better combination of speakers on a single day. Such cross-cutting themes, such cross-cutting subjects, but all around the COVID-19 management, all COVID-19 crisis, and how the response of different stakeholders has been. It's been a blessing to be a part of this entire set of deliberations, this entire discourse, and some amazing interventions by the great speakers. So we are really behind schedule, but then the last presentation, Gaurav Saab, we also thought, we were just kind of pushing it. We could have had you, with more time, but then I think it would have been incomplete, the OTP, without you. So thank you so much again, one final time. Thank you. Any final comments from you, Professor Bansal Saab? Anything you would like to share before we close, and we'll invite my colleague?
No, well, I think that saying anything more would, like you said, it would be pushing it. The only thing is that if it is being recorded, if I could get a copy of this recording for my
Most definitely.
That's all.
Most definitely.
And my sincere thanks to all the people who are putting such gracious comments. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bansal Saab. Thank you so much. Any final comments, Menak, from you? We would love to hear. You've been instrumental in putting the entire show together. Any final words of wisdom from your side?
No, thank you, Rubab. It was really wonderful. We had sessions from environment. We have sessions, from media. We have vaccinations. We have sessions on, railways. So it was really wonderful, the way, and I'm really thankful to you for your guidance, for which, we can effectively work towards making all these webinars and other works, very successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Akhil, another very integral part of the team. Your comment, please.
Yeah, so you would see a smile on my face. So I've never been so happy towards the end of an OTP. So it was really inspiring to hear Professor Bansal and the kind of facts and figures presented by him. It was just mind-boggling. The Dabak Railways has been doing since ages. Railways has been supporting the government, and it has come to the forefront every time for every crisis. Railways has been there. So it's been a Herculean task that they are performing, and they're coming forward every time. So I salute to them, and my compliments to Bansal Saab as well. Thank you so much, Bansal Saab.
Thank you, Akhil. Thank you so much. In fact, we would have loved some live comments coming from these brilliant minds who are connected.
It's my good fortune that I represent such an amazing organization. I am blessed.
No, we would all agree on that, sir. We will all agree on that. I mean, and as I said, I've met a lot of railway, employees and at different levels, working at different levels, at official level, at technical level, at administrative or even tactical level also. But this is something. This is a the ever-inspiring smile on everyone's face when they talk about their organization. I think this is perhaps the strongest in industry community. Like private sector में लोग टाटा के लिए बोलते हैं, that's a huge people go out of their way to express their views about if they're working in Tata. And I think private or public sector, I think railway takes the biggest pie of respect. No, this is without doubt and beyond any sort of doubt. Thank you so much. Again, we would have loved to have some live comments also, because I'm sure people who are mentioning their comment, they would love to speak. But today, because of shortage of, although we took some live comments yesterday, we had people speak live on this platform. But today we are really behind time, and it's already 5 o'clock. But then we have Ghosh Babu. Thank you so much, Professor Ghosh, for joining us. He had an important meeting to attend, which he's quickly attended and come back and joined us. Dr. Ghosh, you would want to really, whatever bits you missed, we will share the YouTube link with you. You will enjoy those 25-30 minutes of intervention by Professor Gaurav Krishna Bansal. Thank you so much, Ghosh, for making this happen. Getting Indian Railways on board, and especially Professor Bansal. Any comments you would like to make, Professor Ghosh? But then, and of course, once you witness his presentation, we'll speak offline as well later. Ghosh, you are on mute. If you could please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rubabji, for this occasion where the last is always ends well. It is all well that ends well. But here, of course, and is the beginning here, a relation that Gauravji, when I contacted him through one of the railway board member, Vajpayee, he says that I'm giving you the right kind of person. You are professor, he is professor, so it will gel well. He said, you tell him that I have recommended. So that way, then when I contacted him, he said that yes, initially I was connected with an IDM and some of the programs, especially on incident command system. He himself learned and he was taking a number of courses. Then I said that now let us relight that bond, and that now let us. That is why it is again a restarting, rebooting. Whatever is there, it is there. Rebooting means it is not closing, but it is again in the last 3-4 days of communication. 3 days of communication that we are keeping with him, that we say that now we are not going to leave you. So that is the way that I think, especially during both the cyclone, especially that which Rubabji, you also mentioned that while cyclone Yash was coming, then how they are taking care of the oxygen cylinder to be transported before cyclone landfall occurs. And there are excellent examples of making number of compartments into COVID hospital or COVID bed, along with all whatever minimum facility that required. So those things, Indian Railway has came up to this occasion. Even now also they are carrying oxygen cylinder from various places. So that is what that we wanted to share here through our participants to the world. And because it is there in the online, so of course I missed it, but I go through that your channel, and then of course we'll make more and more such more things that we will try to make up together in the future. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes. So very rightly put, Dr. Ghosh. I think it's been an amazing 3 days of deep discussion, very deep deliberation on role of industries, and anyone who would have come to this OTP with a thought that only industries perspective would be discussed, how industries or factories, sometimes you have that sort of a mindset when you attend, and then when you come across such visionaries, such speakers who change the entire who really expand your bandwidth of learning. And because the industries was not only role of industries was not specific to MSMEs or corporations. It was media industry. It was Indian Railways, as Bansal Sahab also mentioned. कि कई बारी railways को industry नहीं मान. मतलब it's not a transporter. It's an industry itself. To me, Indian Railways is perhaps the most independent organizations, which is self-sustainable to a great extent. In matlab, from the cadre to I don't know if I am wrong, but I wanted to share this. It has just come back to my mind. I think it was 2007, 2008 when someone was discussing. I was at NDMA, Disaster Management Authority, and we discussed about hospital beds. The government of India runs and owns in this country. I could be wrong, but maybe I might be confusing it with something. But to me, Indian Railways has more hospital beds than the government of India at one point in time. They have their own facilities.
So that's correct. That's correct. I mean, the overall number of hospital beds is the greatest with us.
है ना? तो सर इससे ज़्यादा क्या मतलब बताने को रह गया? मतलब this is something which reflects very clearly the sort of organization you are representing here. So it's अपने में ही एक बहुत बड़ी it is beyond an organization, beyond a संस्था. So we are very proud, as I said, and जितनी भी presentations हुई हैं, from Mat Sagar Saab to Himanshu Shekhar, Ahmad Saab. Then yesterday we had Sunil Pandey, Director Environment and Waste Management from TERI. We had Professor Dr. Anil Gupta, Professor ECDRM, NIDM, dear colleague of Dr. Ghosh, Deepak Pandey from Deepak Fertilizers and Petrochemicals, Rituraj Mehta, a great, I would say, a courier warrior and COVID survivor from Adani Power, who himself, who just come out of his COVID hospital admission, who was discharged 15 days back, who was gasping for breath during his presentation, but he stood there. He said, he said, I might not be able to finish my presentation, but allow me and give me a chance. And we said, if you can't, don't worry about it. But he actually successfully shared some such interesting facts, which, absolutely, hats off to him, and, salute to Rituraj. And, I've conveyed my best wishes to him. And, we will always be indebted for the effort he made that day. But I think overall, it was a huge, I would say, one of the most successful OTPs we've had in the past year, something which we will remember for a long time to go. And there is another one, which is coming up next week with NIDM. The details are being sent out to all different participants and different stakeholders across industries, civil societies, academia, and of course government officers. We look forward to a similarly interactive and interesting 3 days of OTP, which is on 16th, 17th, and 18th, if I'm getting the dates right. 16 से 18 June, right?
16 to 18, yes, right.
Yes, 16, 17, and 18. So it would be great, and I think it would be unfair also for me to not mention a few names who have really been very supportive of this platform. Vivekanandanji, Devajit Bora, Shravan Kumar Singh, Venkatesh Naidu, Joy Chandran, Priya Bhatt Sharma, Surabhi Singhal, it was amazing. And the best part, it was a very positive approach she has complimented. Anjali Verma, of course, Harindra Kumar Pachauri, Kishore Kumar Vedanta, Subhra Bhattacharji, Pooja Bharti, Saini Saab, Girdhari Lal Saini, and thousands of more comments, which I think, it was well deserved. In these 3 days, energy well spent, and I think we've made some good new friends also. Thank you so much, Bansal Saab. Thank you again. I think this association will go on, much deeper. And
We'll be in touch, Sood sir. We'll be in touch.
Definitely we will. Ghosh Saab, I think on that note, should we say a goodbye to all? Yes, I think we've had a great last message from Sukanta Kumar Das. I'm sure Bansal Saab would have read it. Great contribution of Indian Railways in the COVID-19 pandemic. We are proud of you people. Salute to all the staff and family of Railways. I think on that note, we can say goodbye, a final bye to all of our attendees, our ambassadors. Please take care, stay safe, stay indoors as much as you can, follow the COVID appropriate behavior, all the rules and regulations. We are slowly again opening up. Respect the law, respect the regulations. It is only for our own good. It will only benefit us and our families first, then the others. So if something is for your own benefit, take it with both hands. Just be careful, be safe, and stay alert. Thank you for